Good afternoon, friends who may be joining us for this live video event to honor the birthday of Donald Marshall Jr. and also his tremendous legacy in the context of Indigenous justice, Indigenous rights, um, his efforts to promote racial harmony and build bridges with multiple people, and his work with youth. And today we're mainly concentrating on the prayer for youth, his passion for youth. And I must ask you all to help me with this moment in technology to reach to you all across the country, across the world, perhaps. And and why I'm asking for a special prayer is because my laptop is doing a little flicker thing at the bottom. Something that happens when the graphics card is not working as well as it ought to. And I'm hoping it won't stall our efforts today. Um, so I'm starting then with a prayer for all of us during these times of global crisis in terms of the COVID pandemic, in terms of the environmental challenges, the fires, the cyclones, the devastation really happening all over Mother Earth, the racial tensions that are impacting us, the challenges really throughout the globe. The school season begins for many people, particularly here in North America, and we're, praying for safety and good learning for students as best as they can move forward. And we're hoping this opportunity of the crisis also enables us to think of new ways forward towards a global circle of all nations, a culture of peace, with respect for Mother Earth guiding all our activities. So today I'm starting really with a presentation, and I'm hoping that we will be able to chat with several people who are part of the Donald Marshall story, and I'm hoping actually that I will be able to Facebook in his brother Terry. But if I don't see that Terry has contacted me shortly, I shall call him. But while I'm doing this prayer, I'd just like to also add a prayer that comes from William Commander's daughter, Evelyn. I talked to her about this moment a few days ago, and she was recalling Donald Marshall at one of the Circle of All Nations gatherings at Grandfather Commander's place. And the smoke makes me actually think about that, because there he was with his oxygen tank, and he and Evelyn were, doing a little bit of that smoking. Everybody who knows Evelyn knows she smokes, and she was laughing, remembering that memory, sort of like a kind of guilty laugh actually, but also noting the passion with which they had chatted that evening. And so I bring her prayer really for people who are trapped in the criminal justice system, and for the understanding of that world that Donald Marshall shared with us. And um, yeah, for the future generation. I'm going to start off my PowerPoint presentation. And for those of you who don't know who we're talking about yet, here's the cover of a book by Mike Harris, um, titled Justice Denied. And this is what brought the Donald Marshall name into the forefront in the late 70s, and then again in the 90s in a big way. I met him when I was working with the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network, And in our newsletter called Link, there we were always about linkages. We produced a documentary on Donald Marshall's youth camp and mentioned it in that early newsletter from the 90s. Okay, so who am I? I'm Romola. I'm the coordinator of the Circle of All Nations. What is the Circle of All Nations? It's the work of the late Algonquin elder William Commander and uh, many people across the world and certainly across Canada have known and believe we still know William very intimately because we feel his presence in our lives. He, more than 50 years ago, created this notion of a circle of all nations, a culture of peace, and embarked on a massive journey of reconciliation and bridge building, as well as relationship building with people, uh, primarily because he wanted to introduce them all to his mother, the Mother Earth, and ensure that they all engaged in positive relationships with his Mother Earth. So we created then a lot of imagery around our work, and we say that what we're doing in this new series is the Circle of All Nations efforts to do training, education, advocacy, communications, and healing. It's always been what this work has been about, and we call it now our Can Teach model. And with this session, we're hoping to really launch some of our open classroom work. So some of the work today will be about Donald Marshall Jr. and his outreach to youth. It'll take the form first of me sharing a little bit of background information on him and chatting with several people whose lives have been impacted by him and his legacy. Then we will be turning to another initiative on outreach to youth with Bikbaye, Bikbaye, a new friend of mine, but introduced to us to an older friend, Andy Mack. And then we will go to a formal presentation, a PowerPoint presentation on Circle of All Nations ideas about child and youth care work, and finish our day with the Donald Marshall Jr. Cultural Camp video. Really, the effort to teach children out there in the bush, the first safe park in North America, created really in 1997, quite a few years ago. So, Donald Marshall Jr. Was incarcerated in the federal system um, at the age of 16. And he spent his youth really growing up with adult offenders in amongst the most serious of um, federal prisons. In this process, it was not just he who lost his childhood, but so did all his siblings. I met several of them over the years, and I know how hard life has been for them. Um, and I'm amazed also at their tremendous resilience and their leadership work in their community. Um, so this is primarily what we're talking about today, but this is of course the legacy of Algonquin elder William Commander, who said, "We must come together with one heart, one mind, one love, and one determination to create a circle of all nations, a culture of peace." Who was William Commander? He was the Algonquin elder of the Ottawa River watershed, who was the keeper of the sacred wampum belt heritage, the Seven Fire Prophecy belt, which was about choice, the 1700s peace belt about sharing, the Jade Treaty border crossing belt, which was really about interconnection, the borderlessness that now we begin to understand as coronavirus shows us, in fact, how deeply interconnected we are with each other across the globe, and with the bio-eco community, the world within which we live. We wrote a book about Grandfather Commanda, and we called it Learning from a Kindergarten Dropout. Over the past few months, I've been going through that book again and teaching it, as it were, with 9 students. Some of them academics from the universities, some of them from community colleges, some teachers in primary school, and others participating because of their passionate interest in Indigenous and social justice issues. And I've realized that that is an extremely dense book. It's not quite as simple as my reflections originally led me to believe. And I realized that it needs a lot of translating for people to understand really the depth of the knowledge and wisdom of our kindergarten dropout. And so we shall be doing more of that type of sharing in time to come. He moved from that to being an honorary and researched PhD, a doctor. He received his honorary doctorate degrees from the University of Ottawa and Quebec Outaouais, and then he was acknowledged really by all the educational facilities in the National Capital Region. And I spent the last 8 years studying him, researching him, so that the whole world wouldn't think he was just a pretty face, and so that I would understand much better what he wanted me to continue to share and teach. And it's been an incredible experience. This work is actually really, I consider, part of my ongoing research work and sharing, because I'm doing postdoctoral studies on William so that I can leave a better understanding of the thinking of the special person within the academy. He comes from his very strong Indigenous groundedness. His Circle of All Nations community includes many folk who are of grassroots, who come from prisons, who come from all walks of life, who might be teachers, who might be brilliant artists, but are really more like a fabric that is part of the tapestry of his work. And we're wanting to bridge then also with institutions, with governments, with organizations, and the academy, so that all may have a better opportunity to understand not only the depth but the profound importance of this person's Indigenous thinking. And I'm going to start off with this prayer, really, in William's own voice, by Flying Down Thunder and Rise Ashen, and our friend Kevin Chief was engaged in doing this, taking the text of William Commanda and presenting it in music. And it shows his profound understanding of his
If you
history.
have arthritis and you eat tomatoes, you need to see this. A new study has...
Columbus came 2 times. Second time he came with 17 ships. Soldiers start killing Indians. They came for gold. When he seen the Pope, Alexander VI, so what they went up and the Pope told him
you there?
They tried to discourage us in every way not to know these things. They were sending our children to the school. The school was beating our children because of the talking near each other. 50,000 children died in these schools. And my parents let us forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. It's been a big way, big thing. But now since the apologies of Canadian people, that's one of the beginning changes that we didn't have before. We were taught ours to live them anyway, regardless what they did to us. Pray for them instead. Some days they may transform. So you understand what they do. It's a long wait. 500 years.
So there we go. That was our prayer from Grandfather Commander. He began to see some hope in the hearts of the people, awakening to the history, the heritage. And as you note, he specifically mentioned the children who were lost in the residential school struggles. And so there we start our formal presentation. I have just called Terry. Terry, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Romola.
So you weren't able to get on Facebook, right?
I'm still trying. I'm listening to you. I'm on the Facebook page. It's just not turning on for me.
Okay. I well, maybe later in the show I can try a messenger call with you, and we can get your face up here. But I am moving down my PowerPoint to show my photo of your family. Okay, so Terry, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay.
And I have a photo of when you and your mom and Lee and your sister and niece came and joined us at Williams' um, 2010 gathering. And for people who are watching, the first photo in the corner is of Grandfather Commander with Terry leaning over him and Lee squatting beside him. So Terry, I invite you to share a few words with us. We're reaching people, our Facebook friends across Canada and in the United States and perhaps elsewhere. And yeah, I want to turn the phone over to you.
Thank you, Romola. Yeah, that would have been my second trip to Kittiganzibi. And today is my brother Donald's birthday. Oh yeah, we drove his youth camp to Maniwaki in a van. I think there was like 8 of us. It was a pretty good experience. It met a lot of interesting people. Trying to get on your site, Romola, and it keeps. Yeah, he was taking troubled youth to these camps, I believe.
Yeah, he brought kids over just about every year.
Yes.
And, I could say really partly the reason I do this thing is because when Junior did the Donald Marshall Senior Cultural Camp, he really hoped after that I would help him find some funding so that it could be an ongoing activity.
Yeah.
And I was just so preoccupied with Grandfather Commander's work And grandfather commander, we were just doing our thing. We weren't waiting for others. So I didn't have the time to put forward what Junior knew was passionately needed. Because I know I used to have many conversations with him about the kids that he'd be trying to help and stuff like that. And he saw a huge need for kids to go back to understand their language, their culture, their roots. And he brought folk to our gatherings, I think, in that spirit, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and yeah, and I came to Nova Scotia, I met him in 1996. And then later, I came to a gathering at your community in Membertou. And then I had Junior help me do a little presentation on Aboriginal justice. So it's since then that I've kind of like known your community, gradually gotten to know, members of your family. I think Junior and you took me, through the town over there at one stage. So I kind of like feel like we've done a lot of time together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never get on Facebook, Romola, so I'm just.
But it doesn't really matter because people can hear you, so you can just tell me, you can just share whatever you like over the phone.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh well, I'm thinking of him today. It's his birthday. We kind of miss him, but we've lost a few of our family members since Donald's been gone. One of our brothers, our mother, our sister. Oh yeah, then the second time we went up was with my niece and her daughter Caroline and Lorianne and my mother. And that was a nice experience as well.
Okay, so then you came one time with Junior,
With his camp group.
with his camp group, because at one time he brought Noel Knockwood's grandson with him.
I brought two of them with me, yep.
Okay, and I remember one of those guys was helping Three Rivers in our kitchen as we were preparing food for the gathering.
Yes, great.
And when you guys were ready to take off, couldn't be found because he was too busy working.
Yes.
Didn't he become a chef?
Yeah, he's got he's certified now.
Yeah, well, that's sort of like so cool because,
Yeah.
what we try to say is people learn so many things during our gatherings, and it's really neat to find the thread. I mean, just imagine you guys came all the way from Nova Scotia to Maniwaki, Quebec, to expose kids to, the culture and the
Yes, yeah.
and
Yeah,
and
I also remember. We were trying to remember who was all with us, and I remember some of them. I just can't remember them all.
okay, yeah, and
I actually went there 3 times.
okay,
Yeah. Me and Lee went up ourselves once.
really.
Yeah, and then we went up with my parents, my mom and my niece. Me and Lee went up and we visited William and. Was she there?
We went to Canada because they weren't there.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
You weren't there, so we went to Canada to visit you guys that time.
okay. Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I have 550,000 photographs. So I'm sure I've got it captured somewhere. It's just that even for this event, I couldn't go through all those photos and find many. I found some, but I'll have to go back and see when you came to Canada. Wow. That's just really really wonderful. The I say I've been teaching this little kindergarten dropout course about William, and we talk about the journey and the connection that the people made across the continent, and really how rough it's been that people get confined to smaller and smaller circuits, and of course in the end with Junior the prison confine.
Yes.
And how it crushes the spirit. But you guys are so amazing, so resilient, that you've brought forward a whole new thrust of energy into the world. And I know your family and your community has struggled much in over the years. But wow, I remember meeting the Captain Alec Denny.
Yes,
With
yeah.
yeah, and we were talking about justice, and he said, in our language, there is no word for justice. He said when kids did something wrong, well, we thought it meant two things, or when people did something wrong, meant one, they were not educated properly, or two, they were needing healing. So his idea was people either needed to be educated, to be taught the right things, and in order to develop like patterns of respect, and also to be healed where we are wounded. So it's pretty brilliant. But yeah, and then your younger brother came and visited here as well.
Simon.
Simon, yeah,
Simon and Adriana drove up there, remember?
yeah.
Yeah, they were on their way to Ontario.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then, of course, separate from the adults, when Junior was part of our Aboriginal Justice Learning Network, he brought your son, no, not necessarily to the network, but to some of his outreach with youth in Northern Ontario, right?
Yes, Duck Lake and those places, isn't it?
Yeah. And I have a picture here. I'll show it. Oh, but you're not going to see it now. I'll talk about it later. But Laura Comwind,
Oh my yes.
yes, she took Junior up to her community, and he talked to some youth over there. Actually, I'll show it right now. And many years later, that's Laura with grandfather and I in my home in Canada. But many years later, she brought all these youth who Junior would have perhaps met years before, and they came again to reclaim their culture in terms of the wampum belt heritage. So even at the sort of like underground level, the beat has been reignited, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how did your mother find coming to our gathering?
Oh, she enjoyed it very much. She was. Yeah, oh yeah, she had her regalia on. She was really, really pleased to meet William.
Yeah.
My niece Caroline, well, I don't know if she follows. She's following something. Anyway, she's.
Okay, is she able to track us on live then?
Yeah, that's Lorianne's daughter. Lorianne's on there somewhere.
Okay, okay, because okay, so there was a niece. No, there was your niece and her daughter who came
Yes.
with your mom during that trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some nice photos of them. And yeah, it was very, very special for us, special for Grandfather Commander to have your mom come in and join us.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so then this is sort of like the plan for today, that I'll continue with this PowerPoint about Junior, and it's just snapshots of the story that we reconnect with. Then I'll be talking to a few other people, some of them by Facebook Live, some by phone, who have connected with him. Then we're going to do a specific workshop on indigenous approaches to child and youth care that Grandfather Commander and I picked up along the way. And finally, we're going to show that cultural camp video.
Yes, yeah. That's the one in Mulliga Lodge, is it?
Yes, indeed. And I don't know if anybody can see anything, but I'm holding up right now the T-shirt that Junior created over there for the camp.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, honoring your dad, really, eh?
Orange?
Yeah. Well, likely your niece can see it.
Yeah, because I'm not getting on yet. Oh, yes, yeah.
But
loan him another tent as well.
Oh, really, eh? Yeah, and that really is a part of the story we should track because despite all the hardship of those years, he really built bridges with so many of these people from the criminal justice system, eh?
Mm.
Yeah, but they still haven't learnt enough.
No.
So the work continues. And in that respect, it's really disappointing, the work of the Learning Network, because Junior put a lot of heart coming to our gatherings. You know, I'll tell you one story. Um, Earlier in the prayer, I was saying I was talking to Evelyn, and she was talking about Junior's oxygen tank.
Oh, yes.
Well, one time and it was one of my first conferences, and I invited him to Ottawa. So I went to pick him up at the airport, and I, offered to help. Okay. Yes, he said I could help. So I was carrying his hockey bag, as it were. And it was this heavy hockey bag, and I was carrying it like to our vehicle. And all of a sudden, I was thinking, my goodness, why am I carrying such a heavy bag? What's this guy doing, right? And it was only when I took him to the hotel that I realized even the flying had impacted his breathing so badly. You know, it was just so tough on his system. And I only realized that because after the conference, my friend who was helping me at the time, Sandy Yep, we drove everybody back to the airport, but we had lots of time with Junior. So we took him to Hogsback Falls, waterfalls. And then I found he couldn't walk down very much. So every time he came to our gatherings, his whole physical body struggled a lot too. And he didn't really let on, we didn't really understand that. But so we're grateful also for those kinds of sacrifices he made
Oh, yes, yes.
to build that at work. I know, and you know, that he spent a lot of time, in segregation in the hole. But I don't know if you know that one time Grandfather Commander and I met him in Toronto, and we took him to Niagara Falls. Did you know about that?
Yes. And you guys went behind the ball?
Yeah, and it was such a wet day, but he really wanted to go walk behind the falls, and he could do it with grandfather, and I think it was really like dealing with all those demons of the holes, and then actually being energized by the waterfalls and the rocks. This is quite an amazing thing to walk behind a line of rocks and water over your head.
Yes.
And thundering, you feel it in your body. So, yeah, that was another special moment we had with him. Yeah. And Lee has been just great because I've sent information to her over the years. And you guys, first, let me say thank you so much for the annual Christmas cards. I'm so bad, I don't do it and I don't acknowledge, but I so much appreciate it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people are on Facebook today, so not too many people send the paper Christmas cards anymore.
Yeah, we're getting slack, but it's always so special for me. Yeah. So how are you doing, Lee?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
doing great actually.
Yeah. So tell us, when you guys were in Hawaii, you had to come back fast, eh?
Yeah, we did. Our trip got cut short by 4 days, but we were going to spend 2 weeks there. But we ended up spending a week there, and that was fine for us. We just the flight that we had to get on because of the COVID, we had to get out of Hawaii before midnight on March 22nd. And
Okay.
we did, and we got the last possible flight out, and we went to Halifax, and we came home, and well, we went the route that we went, and then we ended up going to Halifax, and then we drove home here. But when we did get home, we had to do the 2 weeks quarantine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we didn't mind; it was worth it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, now you're keeping safe there.
Yes.
Except for the other physical things. I hope you're feeling better today, Terry.
Yeah, I'm feeling better today.
Okay, good.
For the next 3 days, I'll feel good.
Okay.
Then it'll happen again.
Oh, well, yeah, don't forget all William Commander's secret remedies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you guys like to say anything more, or shall I move on with the rest of the program?
Oh, you can move on with the program, Romola.
Okay, well, thank you so very much, Terry and Lee. I'm sorry we're missing um, Paul, but perhaps at another moment we'll catch him. And all the best to the family and the community there, to your brother David too. And take good care.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
But
Let me go back here now. So that was Terry. Then, as you will have figured out, Donald Marshall Jr.'s brother. And now I'll return to our PowerPoint presentation because shortly I have other people to talk to. So this, of course, is the work and vision of Elder Commander, and it focuses on respect for Mother Earth and respect for each of us, each other. And it's a sacred journey, really, that we consider this work. This image of the canoe is of a bowl with porcupine quill stitchery that Grandfather Commander liked to keep his pipe tobacco in. So here now then is an image of Grandfather Commander and Donald Marshall Jr., our close Circle of All Nations friend. And we ourselves figure there are four things that are really important about the work and outreach of Donald Marshall Jr. Of course, the justice theme, because he was incarcerated for 11 years for a murder he hadn't committed. The indigenous rights theme, which is associated with the eel case and fighting for the indigenous rights to the grand natural resources of their lands. The spirit of reconciliation, which is part of our Wolf Project, plus his outreach to people in the correctional, the justice system, and also then passion for youth, which is, of course, the primary interest in our presentation today. So, with respect to the justice theme, we say very briefly, because we're not going into this in so much detail at this point. Donald Marshall Jr. triggered shift in the justice system. The 1989 Marshall Inquiry ushered in the new age of indigenous justice, and he went after truth and justice and accountability himself. The institutions resisted, and it took two inquiries to exonerate him. He is the indigenous forefather of the Wrongfully Convicted Initiative, a group inspired by Reuben Hurricane Carter, whose black name was cleared after years of imprisonment. And it's really then so sad that the sacrifices and the public acknowledgement of the sacrifices of these remarkable men and others like David Milgaard and others hasn't created enough shift in our global world. But here we say indigenous paved the way for this new breath of accountability that has been of benefit to many Canadians and thus influential in the emerging culture shift in Canada, with the indigenous seed being foundational in terms of reclaiming a different notion of justice. So this photo is about a presentation that I made to Correctional Services of Canada about restorative justice, Aboriginal justice, I think back in 1997. So both Junior and Grandfather Commander were with me. It was not exactly easy for him to be amongst all those correctional folk at that early stage. But here he's in a photo with parole board members, and one of them, Ron Boucher, was my parole board member when I used to work in correctional services in the prairies when I was at Saskatchewan Penitentiary. In fact, that is really probably partly why Junior and I got along so well, because in some form or the other we both had done time and we both understood deeply what that system was all about. Now, here we move on to the next theme in terms of his work, which is the racial harmony and reconciliation. And Donald Marshall Jr. was presented with a Wolf Project Award in 2000 at our Circle of All Nations Millennium Peace Gathering. He received the Wolf for his courageous effort in creating awareness about issues of systemic and overt racism, particularly with respect to Aboriginal peoples and the justice system, and for his efforts to promote mutual respect between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples through outreach to youth, communities, and to justice system representatives. The Wolf Award was presented to him on May 24th, 2000 in Ottawa during a conference of the Circle of All Nations Culture of Peace Millennium International Peace Gathering hosted by Elder William Commander. Here he joins a few other special recipients you might know: Grandfather Commander himself, President Mandela, Chief Oval Looking Horse, and Ray Sundstrom, who worked with students in the Western Quebec School Board. It was actually Ray Sundstrom who brought Donald Marshall to the attention of the Wolf Project, and he had to be very forthright about explaining to the Wolf Project why it was so why this nomination was of such critical importance. Because, even then, a couple of decades ago, people were not paying enough serious attention to the strengths and the visibility of Indigenous peoples. And of course, that remains a continuing issue. But I mentioned Ray because he was a staunch supporter of Donald Marshall Jr. In fact, he visited me last week out of the blue, and the first thing he came up the stairs talking about was Junior. So the Wolf Project then is a project where we focus on dignifying each other as one race, the human race. And here at the Millennium Gathering is a picture of Junior, Donald Marshall Jr., with the former Governor General, Adrian Clarkson. The work of reconciliation and bridge building was a big statement about the leadership character of Donald Marshall Jr. He had been the recipient of much abuse and systemic and overt oppression, in particular from police, the courts, and the correctional system, and even more so after his exoneration. And it takes a mighty strong person to do the kind of bridge building he did with the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network, but unfortunately, the work was not understood or valued enough 20 years ago, so some of the seeds have not matured as he would have wished. Still, we do not forget his commitment to peace building and the role he played in the development of the vision for the Asanabka Peace Building Center at Victoria Island. And we know that he and his family, who suffered much anguish too, will continue to inspire us. I mean, there you people at large would have to understand that for many years, while he was accused of being the killer, his family too suffered the anguish of that marking. And it's not just that, the actual person who was the victim of the crime was a black person. And of course, that ended up also stirring up the kind of racial tensions in the community that really we don't want to see a part of our world anymore, but that we do still see rearing its ugly head today. And so I say, yes, further, we, like he did daily, live with the memory of his black friend Sandy, the victim of the original wrongful conviction that took his youth as well. Then to switch gears to the other important thing that people remember Donald Marshall for, and it's the legal challenge and treaty rights. And here I'm quoting a paragraph from the treaty rights in the Canadian Encyclopedia about Donald Marshall Jr. And I'm pleased to say that the photo that accompanies the article is one that comes from our Circle of All Nations Millennium Peace Gathering. In August 1993, after catching and selling eels near Antigonish, Nova Scotia, Marshall was convicted on charges of fishing out of season and without a license. That began a 6-year legal battle over First Nations treaty rights that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The landmark, in a landmark ruling reached in 1999, the court upheld fishing and hunting rights that the Crown had granted the Mi'kmaq people in a treaty signed in 1760. The Marshall case remains an important Indigenous rights ruling, affirming the rights of First Nations people to earn a moderate commercial livelihood from fishing and hunting, subject only to conservation requirements. Marshall, who never considered himself a political activist, said, "I wasn't there for myself, I was there for my people." Now, of course, I'm quoting that argument over there, but the Marshall case is just a trajectory towards a world of further accountability. And later in our show, we'll be talking with a young student who's looking at other provisions in the legal system to move some of these limited arguments of the system to embrace and lead off from what the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has had to affirm, that First Peoples have prior rights and within their lands. And so gradually we hope the larger world will come to understand these truths. And now I'm showing you a book written by Donald's longtime partner, Jane McMillan, and it's about truth and conviction, Donald Marshall Jr. and the Mi'kmaq quest for justice. We hope to be talking to Jane a little later in the program. Yeah, I think I've already covered that segment, and it's also a part of what the book discusses. Okay, so from there then, I'm going to move on to, like today, we've got from August 3rd, the tropical storm Isaias launched itself over the Atlantic seaboard, and just last night my friend Delphina was telling me that tropical cyclone is now holding sway over the eastern seaboard. This being Donald Marshall's birthday. And this just launches me into an aside in terms of the environment, the Mother Earth theme. Here this takes us back to 2004. And Grandfather Commander was part of the launch of the Boreal Rendezvous, an initiative of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Association, together with the David Suzuki Foundation, to wake people up to the urgent need to transform our relationships with Mother Earth and the environment. And Grandfather Commander served as the honorary elder for that book. In fact, there's a beautiful coffee table book on that initiative, and it is sandwiched between Grandfather Commander's prayers at the front cover and at the back cover. And the wolf howls in those prayers. So really, the wolf is not just only the symbol of our wolf project, it's a symbol of relationship, a relationship with the wild. Here you see Junior and Grandfather Commander with David Suzuki. And in the next picture, there was a wild concert with Derek Miller, the musician from Six Nations. And here are our friends with with him. I just point to that to show that the work for the environment was also of importance. This is just an aside. As we drove through Hamilton, we took Junior and his son Randy and grandfather Commander to visit some of my relatives in Hamilton. Next, Junior joined us for the Awakening gathering, and here he is with our other friend Douglas Cardinal, and uh, and you can see in this little picture, or maybe you can't see so well, and grandfather's listening very intently to what his young friend is having to say here. I made this joke really. When I first met Donald Marshall Jr., he didn't really say very much. But over the years, he became a key storyteller in our Circle of All, no, in our Aboriginal Justice Learning Network conferences. I didn't realize really how hard I was making things for him because I would show the documentary associated with the story, the Justice Denied story, and his parents were part of that movie documentary. But he nonetheless shared powerful stories that wakened many of us, but unfortunately not the criminal justice system. But anyway, towards the end of his life, when he'd come and visit us, he would talk non-stop, and he talked non-stop with Grandfather Commander, and we'd be exhausted. So it was really wonderful that he found his voice so strongly over the course of the years. He participated in many, many workshops at Victoria Island, and and this one was when we did a workshop on sustainable relationships, um, because we were kind of trying to move away from really the United Nations focus on sustainable development. We thought everything was about relationship, as much with Mother Earth as with each other. And then finally, we come to what we're really supposed to be talking about today, and I better talk fast because I've got some people waiting to join us. Passion for youth. Donald Marshall Jr. and all his younger siblings lost their youth by the time he was 16, and this weighed heavily on him. He had held a passionate concern for youth, including youth at risk. He was a key player in the efforts of the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network to advance an agenda of restorative justice and crime prevention, and we produced a documentary on his cultural camp. Now converted to a digital version, we're able to screen this with you to conclude our workshop later today. And I showed you this one earlier where some of his outreach was with the community of Laura Camwin and the youth in Northern Ontario. And again, the journey continued right to my dining table. And I noticed earlier on Facebook that there's a Sue Lucerio on watching our live video, and she came with the many wampum belts that she had created to share with grandfather many years ago. So it's great that you're on our show there. Hopefully we'll talk later. So the Donald Marshall Jr. The Senior Youth Cultural Camp is what we call a safe park. Some of you will know that I've talked about the work of my sister Zeni Thumbadoo, the National Association of Childcare Workers, and a big component of their child and youth care work is the Safe Park community. Um, we note that the Marshall Camp drew out themes of the laws of nature, indigenous wisdom, child and youth care issues, justice and peace building, and brought those themes together very powerfully. 20 years later, it remains the original safe park and most critically needed activity for Indigenous communities and all others to address in this mounting crisis of child and youth care. He himself delivered workshops on youth, was a staunch player in the circle work and the vision for Sanabka, and he continues to inspire our ongoing effort. In this image, you see grandfather and Junior's young son, and we recall that he was speaking in Mi'kmaq language to that young Junior, and so the baby started the language reclamation program early. And on August 6th, well, Junior's brother Terry called close to midnight to tell us that life was drawing to the close on August 5th and that our friend was leaving. And grandfather and I smoked the sacred pipe. We were in the midst of an annual spiritual gathering and we were missing Junior in any case. Year after year, he had brought so many youth, as Terry was telling us, from the community to participate in the gatherings. It was also the 39th anniversary of my arrival in Canada. And yes, that is an eagle on the tree. I photographed it. I had gone kayaking in the evening and was mesmerized by this eagle. And then Grandfather Commander began to get worried because I wasn't returning. He was all set to send Michael to come out in a boat to find me. But yeah, it was a moment of memorial. And so the Circle of All Nations hosted a memorial for Donald Marshall Jr. on Victoria Island in 2009, September 13th. Gaston Lavoie created a video for us. Many special folk joined us, and I mention only the ones who have departed here. The Honorable Paul Dewar, who Junior met even on his last trip to Ottawa regarding the Victoria Island vision. The elder Vern Harper, the urban elder, and also our dear friend who just parted, Elder Bell Brandt. And we know Junior Spirit was with us. As we sat in the strong afternoon sun, Elder Bill Brandt brought out an umbrella to protect grandfather. Ray Sundstrom actually held it. And I almost started laughing. The pattern in the umbrella was the same motif as the mugs and bag that Junior and his wife and son had given us after their last visit to my home. And so the pattern on this mug was the same as the pattern on the umbrella, and not too many umbrellas come looking like that. So I say, never mind about quantum, that's how spirit works. Junior's mother and family joined us for our 2010 circle gathering. Surely one of the strongest women of our time, Mrs. Callan Marshall finally found some ease with the deep pain she'd been carrying for decades, or so she said to me and the old man. Incredible story. And so we say yes, with the hope and the reconciliation, the door is always round and open. And so we're grateful to have friends like Donald Marshall Jr. to help us continue the legacy work of Grandfather Commander. Okay, so now let me end with that, and let me actually pull up my next presentation. Oh, well, maybe not. Maybe I have to go to find I have to go and find Chrome. Where are you? And see who I am going to find to interview. And no, actually, first I have to phone Jane. So I am now going to call Jane McMillan. Dr. Jane McMillan works at, let me just do this first. Jane is the person who wrote that book, Truth and Conviction, and I'm hoping I'm going to reach. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Wonderful to have you, and I'm sorry, my timing is just not good, but great to have you up here. And yeah, so sympathies all around on this special moment.
Well, it's a very beautiful commemoration that you're doing, Romola,
Thank you.
and it's just a big.
Uh, Jane, that didn't come through so clearly, so
I don't. How do you want me to?
I've got my phone as loud as possible, so yeah, maybe just close to your mouth, maybe.
Okay, I'll try and speak loudly.
Okay.
Hello, and no, thank you for these beautiful commemorations, and the photos are bringing back so many floods of memories, and it's wonderful that Junior's being honored today. I can remember many of the birthday parties we had celebrating his day, and he had a lot of fun on this day. And oh my gosh, Romola, there's a picture of Junior with grandfather, and I have that shirt, and I was just like, oh wow. Anyway, thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was really rather amazing. So a little later we'll be showing the video, and yeah, that takes us to work that was initiated so many decades ago, and yet is so totally relevant today. Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the on the land learning was something that Junior understood right away as being critically important to Indigenous rights mobilization and to the health of people, and he was way ahead of his time. Clearly, the energy he poured into the youth camps over the many years, the relationships that he was willing to forge with people like corrections, as you mentioned earlier, really point to the fact that he was willing to do just about anything to carry the vision forward. And I think we really need to learn from that and take that up as well today, all of us in our work, and really try and advance the beautiful work you're doing with Safe Park. I think is instrumental to driving the changes that need to happen to end the systemic discrimination, to really fortify the notions of reconciliation and equity and inclusion and the celebration of diversity.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're engaged in there in the East.
Well, boy, where to begin? We've got a research network that's called the Wabanaki Labrador Research Network, which is a group of health researchers from across the Atlantic region working together to create co-learning lodges with communities to carry out health research. We're working with a group of Indigenous legal scholars around building Indigenous Justice Institute and, trying to get informed about what are Indigenous laws and how they can operate today. We are constantly challenging the structures of power that have oppressed and denied Mi'kmaq people their rights. We're working on the development of livelihood strategies so that Mi'kmaq persons can exercise their rights freely without being controlled by other mechanisms of power, so that they can be self-determining in their resource extraction and in their community development. So those are just some of the things that we're working on.
Wow, that's quite an agenda. So then, you're a professor of anthropology at Saint Francis Xavier. For folk out there who might not know, and you're also chair of a center. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Chair of, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
What are you doing there at that university?
Well, at the university, I'm teaching the Indigenous Studies stream for the anthropology department, and we're very excited to be going into the classroom tomorrow. A little bit nervous, of course. The first day of class is always an exciting one, and we'll continue. We've been trying really hard at the university to make strides to build better relationships with the Mi'kmaq communities and the Mi'kmaq Nation, and provide greater opportunities for Indigenous students. And we have some really amazing endowments available to help access the university's education offerings for Indigenous and African Nova Scotians at the university. So we're working on building up better networks and better student support and having a more, again, inclusive pedagogy available to them. But, it's like the justice system, Romola. It takes a long time to make positive change in these institutions that are colonial. So we're doing a lot of decolonization work and mobilizing the communities towards reconciliation, but that's going to take a lot more effort.
Well, thank you for joining us. A few years ago at the University of Ottawa at the Anthropology Conference, when we managed to get in a workshop with grassroots people into that academic vein. And it was really quite an interesting challenge because grassroots folk were so focused on the gut issues that were driving them, and to combine that with the kind of abstractive perspective of the universities was intriguing. And what we're hoping to do, particularly since COVID has launched us into this, is to use the online capacity, the open capacity, to really do open school, so that we can perhaps encourage bridging in thinking between Indigenous, grassroots, the organizations and government institutions, as well as the academy. And you've been patient with us and joined us, like I say, a few years ago, many years ago actually. You and one of my other guests coming up soon, who is Clayton Sandy, and Junior, joined the Salvation Army gang, and we did a cross-cultural thing in, I think it was Lake Simcoe.
Right.
And it was a challenge, really, for them to understand the Indigenous perspectives that it was threatening. It was threatening. And really, we do need to move towards like a world where we realize important ideas come from all over. And here in this land, the Indigenous thread is so critical. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the gathering there, and the people that attended that are still very active. Those that are still with us in driving those changes that we set out at that time, and I love that work, and the work with eels too is carrying on around the world amazingly as well. So there's some fantastic work being done by Gunjit Mara people on eel down in Australia. It's very exciting, and certainly Mara eel fishery work is too. So those relationships, I think, are bonding people both nationally and internationally too. And Grandfather William really led the way for that in Canada. So there's so much in terms of the history that we have to keep moving forward.
Okay, well, the journey continues, and of course, the eel is this huge symbol of our journey motif of our circle work. So, yeah, that's wonderful that you mention it. Okay, so if there anything more that you want to share at this point?
No, just that we love you very much, Romola, and thank you. And we really are grateful for honoring JR. We miss him terribly, and want to carry his good works forward.
Okay. Take good care. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Jane, for joining us. I'm now going to go to find my friend Clayton, and I am going to try to do a video chat with him. Now, Clayton is on Facebook for the very first time today. And I hope we get him.
Hello.
Oh, I was just going to phone you. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very good. Uh, Sorry about the timing, but
Oh, that's fine. I
yeah.
was busy listening to you.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's quite interesting from my group.
I can't hear you right now. Maybe you pressed some button. So this is our friend Clayton Sandy, who's been part of our work with Aboriginal justice since the late 90s. And he was part of our learning network work, met Junior years ago. Can you say something? Let me see if I can hear you. Um okay, I'm gonna call him again. So yes, this is the first time Clayton has joined Facebook, and so we're hoping this will work out.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
Okay.
good. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. If you can move your head up higher somehow, it'll be
Hang on,
great.
okay.
Yeah, that's better. And yeah, you can look straight down or a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good. So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Good to see you, Romola.
Okay. Yeah.
It was nice. It's nice to hear from Jane.
Yeah.
It was nice to hear your presentation on the history of Mother Tamanda.
Uh, yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
we'll do fuller presentation on Grandfather Commander another time, but today it's really more focused on the junior and the child and youth care
sure.
thread. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. When you mentioned to Jane about that conference we went to north of Toronto, it brought back a lot of memories.
yes. Share
Yeah,
some.
I remember that. I remember that when we had our first day there, we went out for we had lunch there, and I suggested we go to the casino for supper that night. And I remember we were getting ready to go, and William said I think he said he had $3 in his pocket. He was going to come with us to the casino. He wanted to join us at the casino,
Well,
so
you,
we took him along, and we had supper at the casino. And
right.
and I remember I was getting some money out of the ATM, and then Donald wanted to get some money too, and he put his card in there, and he thought he pressed $80, but $800 came out.
Oh, God. Casino money, I guess. Yeah, that's the way.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And but the presentation we did there, like again, that like you had mentioned that I don't think the people in the audience are ready for that.
Not at that stage, eh?
Yeah, I think that because of course we didn't make headway with any of the recommendations, but it's fine. It seemed like it was the old guard that were still in control then,
Yeah. You know,
and
it's
they were prepared.
very interesting. I just read something just a couple of days ago, and it says it takes 20 years to change a city. And I was just
Okay,
thinking maybe all those seeds that were
yeah,
planted, well, really in our instance, 30 years, or
yeah,
maybe some of that will now sprout because we are in times of like dire crisis. And I mentioned the environment earlier, not probably clearly enough, but really the environment, Mother Earth, is obliging us to uh, reconfigure a lot of behavior and patterns. Eh?
Well, because because in Winnipeg, of course, we have the largest population of Indigenous people here, so I kind of keep an eye on Salvation Army downtown that houses a lot of Indigenous people. And
Yeah.
even though that you're saying that things have moved, things have changed, but things really haven't really changed that much in regards to Salvation Army accepting our spirituality yet.
Okay.
I find that's one of the well, that's still one of the biggest barriers with places like Shalom and some of the places in Winnipeg. They're just not open. I think they're afraid of basically accepting our religion and getting healthy and moving forward in life.
Yeah, and of course that's the resistance. Uh, it's it's yeah, maybe it's a different cultural perspective, or it's a kind of structure that has created, I suppose, similar issues for us with respect to government, with respect to organizations, and some in some instances even the academy. Even though we have planted some of William's thinking there, it's not been an easy process. And
Oh no, not. I find that in the past maybe 4 years since we retired, I've been trying to introduce like sweat lodges and ceremony circles and that, and it's just not accepted at all.
no,
Yeah,
yeah,
so it is changed in some senses, but yeah, we still have a long journey to go.
yeah. But you've been on this journey for a long time, and I just will just remember when you first met Junior, you said you felt in some way you had to acknowledge this person, and you didn't know how, and you took off your watch and you
My
gave,
watch.
yes, you gave him your watch.
Yeah, I grew up with, like, of course, being from Sioux Valley, Dakota First Nations. Whenever we have guests or do something, we always give people something, and I had nothing to give them because I didn't realize I was gonna spend time presenting and stuff like that. But I really liked his presentation. He actually reminded me of a friend of mine that who was actually in Stony Mountain here, and his name was Buddy. But him and Buddy had the same nature. They even kind of looked alike, and that's who Donald reminded me of Buddy. And Buddy was sort of in the same instance as Donald. He was just a young guy, and I think 4 or 5 guys who got caught downtown, and somebody got killed, and they sent 3 or 4 of them to Stony Mountain. And I got to know him from playing hockey up there. But
Okay.
he reminded me of Donald. But then after Donald finished his presentation, like I said, I had nothing to give him, so I give him my watch, and him and I talked about that watch about a year later and stuff like that. So
That's very good because obviously, what we're trying to do over here, we're connecting. We're doing geography, and you're, of course, an old cartographer. We're doing geography, connecting dots of along the Earth in
sure,
space,
sure,
but
yeah,
it's also across time, and
yeah,
that's an intriguing, part that your
sure,
the watch symbol, the messenger of
sure,
time, threads
sure,
into the future from that early stage. But yeah, so
yeah,
yes, Clayton, you did a lot of work, outreach at corrections. You did work with the RCMP, with the Winnipeg Police.
yeah,
So you've spent a lot of years. Uh, in fact, that's how we met, RCMP conference, trying to shift
yeah,
the justice system.
yeah, yeah,
But you've also have been really passionate about youth, and you used to do the role model program.
yeah. In 1987, myself and about 4 or 5 other friends of mine in government, we realized one thing really quickly. We all worked and started government in the late 70s, and we realized that all of us, our mentors were non-native mentors. There weren't any mentors. There weren't any native mentors in government. So we decided to start our own organization. So we started an organization for 20 years, and we actually provided. We wanted to provide native role models to native youth in Manitoba. So at the end of 20 years, I had an inventory of about 450 role models I could call upon at any time that would come out and share their story.
Okay, I
And we're
remember.
able to. I think that the beauty of the organization was that we could share our own personal struggles with youth that were actually living those struggles and still do, and they still live them. Yeah,
Yes, and I remember you gave grandfather and I a beautiful book of pictures
mm-hmm.
of role models, including you as a
Yeah,
dancer. So, you know, you reclaimed a lot of your spirit through your dance, eh? Your
Oh,
powwow
for sure. Yeah,
dancing.
yeah. I always tell people that if it wasn't for my power, I don't know if I would have survived in government, because whenever I was going through difficult times, my head would go to my powwows about making my outfit and traveling, stuff like that. So my head would go there, and of course I'd be stuck in the situation. But I think that powwow, the music, and getting to meet people, that really helped me in my struggles, and actually helped me to feel proud of myself.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course that comes through very clearly in that little documentary video clip
Yeah.
for the residential, no, for the Truth and Reconciliation
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, experience,
Yeah.
right? Where you go through the four generations and you end up with you dancing and your grandson.
Yeah, yeah. I find that just sharing the generations of my dad, myself, my son, and my grandson, just the difference in maybe like 50 years has changed, eh? And I don't think if we don't change, nothing else changes. So we have to take it upon ourselves to stand in our truth and say those things, eh? Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So you've had a long time commitment at that, and of course, even though you're retired, you don't stop for a minute. I know you're always into new initiatives and new programs, and really in a way, it breaks my heart because I was saying earlier when Junior came to our Learning Network meetings, it wasn't
Uh-huh.
just putting himself into a strange new place with new strange people, but
Uh-huh.
also physically his body was struggling
Yeah,
to actually
for
come.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I remember one time I went to a crime prevention conference in, gosh, Thunder Bay, I believe. Yes, Thunder Bay. It was pretty neat
Okay.
because they beat a thunder drum, and the skin had actually been prepared by grandfather commander and his wife Mary many years ago. So
Oh,
there
okay.
at this crime prevention conference,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
the thunder drum was beating on William's skin. But I recall it was like all sorts of First Nations police and other justice workers, and
Yeah.
Junior was totally alone. Like, it was one
Uh-huh.
of his first public presentations, and I remember
Yeah.
we pretty well had to talk all night long to sort of
Uh-huh.
like, keep him focused to find his voice to be able to share. And none of those people, like, understood or empathized. It was, so, and I
Yeah.
realize how hard it is to have done all of this. Then it's very disappointing that the Learning Network did not take off, the vision for Victoria Island didn't take off. Other folk just don't understand at what cost we do this. And you,
Yeah.
of course, you just carry on. Yeah, very inspirational.
I always tell people, people ask me what I did in my career, and when I think if it boils down to it, I always tell people I spent 40 years doing Indian 101, and I still do that. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And when I remember one year when the progressive conservatives were in power here, I was getting a lot of flack from some of the leaders for working with them and traveling with them. And I would tell them sometimes, if we don't have anybody on the inside working with these people, who's going to educate them? Who's going to get them just to understand just simple things about us? So that was sort of my take on that. And I used to always say that, would you rather having a non-native guy here or than me? And sometimes that would sort of simmer things down. But I can understand how when you talk about Donald feeling lost there, because in my time in government, I felt that same way 1,000 times, where I'd go into a room and saw white people, and I feel like just taking off and running into the corner, because nobody has a clue of what we've gone through and what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
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 it's something, and they always pick on the rough and tough moments.
sure, oh,
Those
for
are the
sure.
ones that they remember, and they don't realize with what frustration and
Uh-huh.
uh, alienation really
Yeah,
we have to go about this. And right now it's still very much a struggle because it's indigenous people who look the way government might expect, that become acceptable. It's so funny. I found a photograph of some native guy from Courtenay, um, and I was trying to figure out who he was because I had promised to send it to him and I never had. And so I posted his paste on William Commander's page. Within 24 hours, more than 3,000 people hit it. So these are
Okay.
all the grassroots native people who
Sure.
I don't see normally up on my Facebook, but they're looking, but they're not part of this world, but they were part of our gatherings. That's
Yeah.
how they
Oh, yeah, for
know.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so in fact what I feel like we're doing today, we're doing open school, we're doing open class,
Sure. Yeah.
so that
Sure.
this knowledge and this information gets equalized. I've been at university studying William, but in fact what I'm doing is returning all the knowledge first to the
Sure.
grassroots people
Sure.
who out of whom it comes, and and
Yeah.
and um, the, this is the kind of shift I think we so desperately need. So that, I mean, my gosh, I met you in '96 maybe, and
Something like that.
and we're
That. Yeah.
still
Yeah.
doing the same beat.
On the
Something's
same.
got to
Yeah.
shift.
It's on the same journey. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
something's
on the
got to
same
shift.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything more to share? I'm talking so much. I'll let you say a few more words, and then
Well,
I'm gonna.
I think that when I first met Donald, he was already having trouble breathing already. Because I remember we're at that resort that we did the workshop at, and I remember him having a difficult time going up flights of stairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that like he was already struggling already with his health already, and then then I think that maybe over the next year we did a lot of presentations together off and on, but I found that things were getting a little bit more difficult for him all the time. And of course, we just prayed for him and hoped the best. But it's always sad that we always lose the good ones all the time, I feel. And and he was such a strong voice, and just the things that I hear about him, I still hear a lot of things on APTN about his story and that, and it makes me feel so good just to see his face again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was thinking about doing this, usually we acknowledge him, but usually as a part of our Equinox event. But the reason I decided to do this especially is because of a conversation with our next presenter. Andrew Costa is a student, a PhD legal studies student at Carleton University. And we were talking about, well, how much do folk know about Donald Marshall Jr.? And in the universities, there's scarcely any attention paid to him. And I consider this the most important historical figure. And, and there is really very little um, a focus on the huge depth of his story. Now there is
Sure.
attention to the legal fishery case, but
Yeah.
the justice platform is diminished. It's hidden.
Yeah.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, then the racial harmony, the reconciliation, particularly under the hugest of challenges with the multiracial, thing,
Sure.
groundbreaking. And then, of course, the
Yeah.
child and youth care, which is really what all our future is about, right?
Sure.
So then I thought, let me just do this kind of a thing. And in fact, as I thought all night, there were so
Mm-hmm.
many memories that came flooding at me. So I think he's very much alive and driving the agenda as well.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
In that, when you mentioned the breathing, I just wanted to acknowledge um, um, Gaetan Lefebvre, Algonquin youth. He was
Yeah.
with the grandfather and I when we heard about Junior being on the operating table for the double lung surgery.
Yeah.
And Terry, I think, called us to say it was looking not good. And
Okay.
so the three of us smoked pipe at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, uh, Junior said something about, being aware of that. I don't want to go into too much of detail,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
somehow
Mm-hmm.
the energy connection,
Okay.
uh,
Sure. Sure.
helped. And then it gave him a few more years to do more things with us. years that
Sure.
were also challenged, but nonetheless he persisted, and so well, the work goes on. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for venturing onto Facebook.
Yeah. No problem.
And now that you know how to do this, some days we can just chat about any
For
old
sure.
thing and add to the educational material we put out there.
Okay, we'll do. We'll do Romola.
Okay. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
And
Have a
thanks for
beautiful day.
encouraging me and supporting me all these years. I should mention, Clayton did the first workshop for men's wellness many years ago, and we took
Yeah.
Grandfather Commander there, and he did wampum bell teachings with the
Good.
guys.
Hmm. Yeah.
Before people started to talk about men needing healing, you did that. And yeah, so
Yeah.
you joined us in Thunder Bay when we did teaching about child and youth
Yes.
care work. So we've,
Mm-hmm.
despite everything, we've tried to keep the thread of the ongoing efforts go, and we'll
Sure.
continue to. Take good care.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was special. Close. And now I'm rather late, so I am going to look for Andrew. Faster. And I am going to see if I can video chat with Andrew, who is our legal studies student who joined our circle work over the last while. Hello.
Hello?
Hi
Hello?
there. Sorry.
Hi. Well, no worries at all. No worries at all. This is a standard procedure there at many of the gatherings there.
So you're kind of used to all our long-winded
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
And of course, since Facebook is being so generous, we control the time schedule, and away we go. But Andrew, we're doing way better. We have you on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us a bit about yourself and tell us about what you want to share with us.
Well, it's an honor to be on here today, and it's been a great experience to hear all of your presentations there. To hear you talking with Donald Marshall Jr.'s brother, and Mr. Sandy as well. It's been sort of great to hear all their experiences there. I really enjoy sort of hearing these kind of personal reminiscing on him, because obviously I never knew him, I never met him. So it's been great to, largely my sort of recollection of him comes through, these texts and, this kind of work. So obviously it's nothing compared to direct talk, but it's still very great to hear all that.
Okay, so tell us about you. Who are you? What are you
Okay.
doing?
Well, I am a PhD candidate, which basically means I haven't yet completed my thesis. I right now at Carleton University in the Department of Law and Legal Studies. Right now, I'm also planning on putting together a postdoctoral research project, basically trying to find ways to work with Mi'kmaq organizations like the Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative, the Native Women's Association in Nova Scotia, to try and comprehend how they have taken up the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights, and whether or not that's been effective or why it hasn't been effective more specifically. And I think it just kind of speaks to what Donald Marshall Jr. Strove for, especially in the 1999 Supreme Court judgment, basically with the idea that these rights that are protected, they're not somehow given by the Crown, or they're not given by the UN. These rights have always existed. They're inherent. And as such, these things, the Crown, UN, these organizations, these things, all they do is just merely recognize. All they have to do is recognize these rights or respect these rights. They're always been there, or at least try to, in some ways, protect them. So that's generally what I'm working on right now, aside from my thesis, obviously. And aside from that, obviously there are many
secondary projects. There's always some as well, but I'm very thankful to be on here today, largely because I think because my introduction to these issues is largely through my sort of my looking into sort of Donald Marshall Jr.'s story, both the wrongful conviction, the inquiry, and the later Supreme Court judgment. And I think that these personal stories that I've been hearing have been so helpful because what they do is they allow me to comprehend what is underneath, or what is what actually is taking place when these legal judgments happen. So I remember, Romola, in your last discussion with Clayton Sandy, you were pointing out how in an earlier discussion we had, I had not really heard about Donald Marshall Jr. up until maybe the second year of my university, and even third year actually. I had heard about conviction, but through the 99 Supreme Court judgment. So I had never really heard much about him, and all I had heard about him was just through the context of that judgment. So I didn't know that he was using money from the wrongful conviction settlement to pay for that Supreme Court judgment. I didn't know about how taxing all this had been on him. I didn't know exactly, the broader we weren't told about the broader political context in Nova Scotia with regards to sort of the conflict between, non-Indigenous fisheries and Indigenous fisheries at the time. So then there's always something to learn with regards to that issue. And I think it's even more important to learn about these matters, especially now in Nova Scotia, given that these, conflicts, with regards to the fishery have, kind of been flaring up again, even 20 years after the judgment has taken place. So that's kind of, what I'm doing right now, and how I kind of stumbled on Marshall Jr. and sort of these Mi'kmaq rights struggles in general.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I was going to actually type in some comments from our previous speaker from, I think, our June session. That was Balkamen Bella, who talked to us from Algeria. And he talked about being a teacher, teaching Indigenous children in Quebec and in Nunavut, and crashing with the system, really finding it was so frustrating because he said the education system wasn't serving the Indigenous kids because it was in a totally different idiom. It wasn't reflecting the language, it wasn't reflecting the culture. It was this hegemonic process that was being imposed on them, and they were dropping out. And then he said he came and he met grandfather to help clear his head, as it were. And then after he got the right kind of encouragement, made a call, booked his ticket to someplace else, and then moved on to his journey with his master's degree and his PhD, which took him, to study with Indigenous people in New Zealand. And it was really like being diverted to the real path. And in a funny kind of way, what you've shared with us over the last few years has taken you from your original path, definitely along this Indigenous thread.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to point out that education point, I remember I was reading an essay by Marie Baptiste there, and she was talking about Mi'kmaq education and how that on its own is a treaty obligation that goes well back into the what's known as sort of the 18th century peace and friendship agreements, and what that means in relation to self-determination, or what it means in relation to jurisdiction as well, in terms of having that authority to govern oneself, having authority to govern one's communities there with education. And I think that's especially important. You're talking about things like, Safe Park, and you're talking about all these other educational and youth initiatives that, Donald Marshall Jr. Helped to develop. And it's interesting because, that he kind of caught on to that because, from what I've read with regards to many scholars, many Mi'kmaq scholars in particular, that's a centuries-long sort of passage, you know. And I think that's very interesting too. I mean, it helps inform ways in which I need to approach certain communities in my own study, whether or not it's directly engaging them or whether or not it's just through reading. I think it's all elections in mind that, okay, these ideas, it's not about what can be granted right now or what can be supposedly granted. It's more about how these have always existed, and it's more a question of respect and appreciation. So I think that's another important kind of element to think about here. You know, we were also talking about, Donald Marshall Jr.'s sort of importance to this discussion with regards to struggles around Mi'kmaq rights and Indigenous and treaty rights in general. And what I found really interesting was that I look at him as sort of building on certain threads that have, that have slowly emerged, that have been slowly emerging over the centuries, in terms of my own studies and things like that. Especially, looking back into the late 20s with Gabriel Syllaboy being the first to sort of launch a treaty rights challenge in the late 1920s. And then, Matthew Simon, and then gradually, you mentioned him earlier on as well. So gradually building, Donald Marshall Sr., building up all of those struggles there as well. Carolyn Marshall, his mother, and obviously all these other individuals that have helped build that up. And so, but he's had such a big impact, not only in the criminal justice framework as well, with regards to wrongful convictions and, the corrections and things of that nature. But obviously with regards to Indigenous rights, I mean, we cannot help but, recall the judgment over in the 99 judgment over and over and over again, especially now, as I mentioned earlier, with these renewed conflicts in fisheries in Nova Scotia flaring up again and again. I mean, now I'm hearing decision being brought up again and again, consistently. So this is something that's very important to look at. And speaking of that, I mean, it's high time I look at that judgment in depth once again, after, a few years. So it just goes to show how I remember in Professor McMillan's book, I think he had this famous quote, Donald Marshall Jr. had this quote, I think it was, "A legend never dies."
Yes.
And it's kind of it feels like that. It feels like that, even though it's only been 20 years, but it feels like that now. He kind of has this, he kind of hovers over all these debates and discussions that are still taking place. So that's what it kind of means to me in terms of these contemporary events there, and how what he's done still has impact, from the education to the criminal justice to the Indigenous.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing all that so passionately.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, super great, and yeah, all the best on continuing that drive forward. Okay.
Thank you very much, and all the best to you.
Okay, we'll see you at our kindergarten class next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take care, everyone. I wish everyone watching all the best.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye. I sort of had to race through that because I'm a little bit late now for our next player on the show, and I hope I'm going to be able to reach Big Bye. This is our new friend who we found via our other friend, Andy Mack. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Good. Good to meet you really in person now via the video link. And thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for your patience. We're running, a little bit late. And I know you've got another meeting, so welcome.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. So it's Big Bye. Big Bye. How would we say?
Big Bye.
Big,
Just Big Bye.
Big Bye. Okay.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
so we actually only talked for the first time yesterday afternoon, but of course, Andy Mack has introduced us over the past several years, so I know a little bit about your work. Yes, that's a better image. Thank you. And I played your music for people over the last few days, and we'll probably finish with that so that they'd have a bit of an introduction to you. But perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you. And welcome and to all of your guests. My name is Big Bai Inejinima. I am from Chicago, Illinois, but I had the opportunity to work with youth and elders all over the world. And I'm a healer, a cultural activist, a youth activist, and a father, um, artist. Um, but more than anything, I try my best to be a brother to all peoples. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yes. So when I was remembering your passion for art and art as the way to reach children, I wanted to share this with you. So in the 2000, Grandfather Commander hosted this Millennium Peace Gathering, the Circle of All Nations Peace Gathering, and we brought in several youth, 5 youth from South Africa. This, of course, was like 2000, so just barely on the turn of the apartheid age. And this group of young people brought music, and they brought art and creativity to our gathering in a very kind of like spontaneous way. I actually still have some of their posters. And what they found was under the healing guidance of Grandfather Commander, these youth who were of multiracial backgrounds, black, colored, white, mixed race, the South African definition of people, um, they found ways that even though the official system had released them from the racism of South Africa, it took the energy, the spiritual energy of the elders and the healers to, in fact, ignite for them a relationship with each other. And that is so much behind your work and then also your outreach to youth. And I wanted to say that, to share this with you because yesterday we talked a little bit about that. Yeah, so tell us then. Tell us more.
Thank you. So back in 2013, myself along with a colleague of mine, Dr. Leslie Clark, we started an organization called Conscious Youth Global Network. And Conscious Youth Global Network came about due to actually an unfortunate event where she lost her 14-year-old son, who was an aspiring poet and artist. She lost him to suicide due to the stress of being a black child, a black young child in a majority white area, growing up and not having um, a support system. And at 14 years old, he took his life. So um, we vowed at that time to have an outlet, an alternative for youth who are um, trying their best to express and articulate their feelings in a positive and constructive way. Um, so this is it kind of started from there. Um, since then, we have been producing events, but more so bringing the youth together to have discussions with elders. It's important to shape and reshape the narrative, um, because I think artistically that is one of the expressions of communication and modes of communication that is very universal and authentic. Um, so if we're able to supply young people with a more solid understanding of a foundation of who they are, what they represent, their value, all of these different dynamics and moving parts, then we really set a precedent moving forward in the future, knowing that these youth are going to be the decision makers. They're going to be taking care of us. So our goal basically is to provide these tools through sharing information and passing down the wisdom that the elders are the carriers and libraries of, with hopes that the youth can reconnect. Because right now, one of the biggest distractions for youth now is the same thing that we're trying to redirect, which is art. The music, what we're seeing on social media, the images, everything plays a part in shaping and impacting the consciousness of our youth, and also the vibration in which we're all, the frequencies that we're on. Will it be a lower frequency or higher frequency? So what we're trying to offer the youth is access to the wisdom of elders, and find a way that it can practically and tangibly be applied to their lives, because times are different. The world is changing every day. There's some things that we can still hold on to, some foundational cultural aspects that we can still hold on to regardless of what is going on in the world. They will always be impactful. But then there are other things that may have worked at one point, but because the world is so different now, it won't work right now. And those are the things that we have to identify and also pass down to the youth so they can be aware based on what they're seeing. What is useful and tangible? What can they apply right now without knowing a plethora of information? But what can they apply right now that will improve their situation, or at least give them something else to consider? Give them something else to really think about. Something that would stimulate their thinking. Something that would be of interest to stimulate their thinking. What are they interested in? How can the elders utilize what they're already interested in and somehow merge that with their wisdom and then give it back to them? So it's really about, what we're trying to do is get the elders to see the world through the eyes of youth, and set the stage so that the youth will be receptive of the world through the eyes of the elders, where they become a mutual medium where both can come, because without one, the other is weak. Either way we look at it, the other is weak. And then we have everyone in the middle, everyone in between, who has a role, but the roles are constantly being defined. So if our youth, everything that they see, everything that they think, everything that they feel, all of these is based on what they're being exposed to, and also what they're holding on to, what they're embracing. I think as elders, one of the main objectives of the gatherings that we have is to create a dialogue, space for dialogue, where we can identify what those are for youth and for the elders. Otherwise, it's almost like fighting a battle, but you don't know what you're fighting. You can't see what you're fighting unless we identify where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths, what can we use, what did we find to be not so useful, what worked before, what doesn't work. All of these things have to be the precursor, in my opinion, to any advancement And we're talking about a new age. We're literally in a new age right now, where energetically it's almost a we don't have choice. The energies don't leave us much choice if survival is our goal. It don't leave us much choice but to prepare our youth as best as we can to deal and to be preservers of this planet and the caretakers and stewards of this planet. So we do have a lot of work to do, but that's our goal is centered around that youth work, is sharing information, learning, and letting them know that we are humble enough as elders to also acknowledge their wisdom and to learn their wisdom, learn from their wisdom. You know, so yeah, I can talk for a long time, but I don't want to take up too much time. But that's a gist of Conscious Youth Global Network, and that morphed to Conscious Youth Global Movement, because the movement is not an organization. The movement is an open source. The movement belongs to everyone. But what we want to do is help the youth and set the stage where now they can flood the airwaves, the radio, media, social media, music, film, flood all of these mediums of sharing information with conscious content, which in turn will match the vibration of the time that we're in. If everything is about balance, we need to match the vibration. And right now, we're in an age where the vibration is demanding of us to be much higher for our own survival. So, in order to do that, we have to give the youth the tools in order to also do what they need to do, incorporate it into their art, incorporate it into whatever they're doing. I think one of the main messages for youth is I should be able to identify you through whatever you express. Whether it's artistically, I should be able to identify or get some idea of who you are. Um, we're trying to get back to that idea, which is accountability. And that accountability is on behalf of the elders too, to where we're not contradicting and being seen as contradictory to the youth, which in turns discourages them from embracing what we have to pass down. I've seen it. Wow, I've seen it too much. I've seen too many discouraged or frustrated youth because they don't feel that they're seeing the models or the examples of what they're being told. They want to see it too. So there's an accountability that we're trying to get a mutual establishment and understanding of, as far as what the responsibilities are on both sides. But ultimately, Romola, we are working and doing the same work in the same heart and in the same spirit and the same mind as you, all of the people that are a part of this conference, and other organizations and people all over the world. We're a small, um, we're a grain of sand, but we're all in the same sandbox. So, yeah, I don't, I can keep talking and talking, but I don't.
Well, that was just wonderful, and maybe sometime we will do another session where we can just keep talking and talking, because this, in fact, is part of like a series. But when you were talking a little earlier, I just wanted to go back to one part in our series where we had our friend Adrian Esposito meet us, and actually, he also is an acquaintance of Mac, Annie Mac. And but he came as a youth to meet Grandfather Commander, dealing with what he called meltdown. I had to figure out what that word meant, but he was dealing with a lot of frustrations that came with his autism spectrum condition, and uh, and he asked Grandfather Commander what he thought about him creating videos. And of course, Grandfather Commander was a great one. He's a canoe maker, Elder Commander. And so the art, the creativity, and all of that is very much a thread in his own growing and being. So he encouraged this young the guy, who then took him on as his brother. This big, bulky 21-year-old or whatever became the 80-year-old's brother. And actually, through that relationship, with great humor, Adrian last time told us that he now claims not only his Italian identity, his Lithuanian identity, but he claims his Algonquin identity because he's the brother of Grandfather Commander. But anyway, the main point is he became a documentary creator. He learned how to create documentaries. One of them is where he actually goes to the elders and asks for their advice on how to deal with his frustration, his meltdown. So the youth goes to the elder, and it was really intriguing because each of these indigenous elders offered something different. And he bounced it back off his psychiatrist, and it was quite obvious his mainstream psychiatrist was surprised at each of the strategies. He opened his eyes. And it was so really intriguing. And then out of that, they also came up with this new word for the differences, and they call it diffabilities as compared to disabilities. And so the youth that you're talking about learning from the elders and learning to express themselves, becoming actually voices of wisdom back to us. Adrian Esposito and his mother Christina have introduced a wonderful thread into our Circle of All Nations work. They came and presented videos at our gatherings, and I've seen his voice grow in just exactly the way um, you mentioned. Another thing I liked about what you said that really we're trying to do right now is to present as much information that kids and adults can access. They don't have to go to organizations, they don't have to go to institutions, they don't have to go to experts. Certainly, when you have a passion for something, you share something. They can go to the person of passion and grasp a few ideas because they got to learn to, I say, walk with 2 feet, like run right now, with, accessing whatever we can as fast as we can. And uh, I suppose in the indigenous way, it's just really a way of being. We've got to learn how to reach that other platform and be, and not get bogged down in these other levels. Yeah. And of course, you do that too with that beautiful song, which I would like to play now. Um, because now the next part of our show right this now will be some of our Circle of All Nations thoughts about child and youth care work. Some of the historic reasons that have limited potential and some of the opportunities to spark anew. And then we'll finish off with our friend Donald Marshall Jr.'s video. So, in a sense, that this today will have contributed to perhaps awakening people, perhaps encouraging the dialogue, the communications, but perhaps also giving people some tools to apply like right away. This has been a part of our series for some time because our focus has been on child and youth care, though I don't have a particular background in it. I come from the prisons and the old guys. But in September, last September, we did a workshop focused on child and youth care issues, and it becomes the opener to this discussion. We had Adrian there, but also we had a woman, my friend Carolyn, talk about the home children in Canada, but perhaps also there in the States. Kids who came in from Ireland and other places who were really adopted and lost their voice and abused here in Canada. And they become then the new professionals who still hold a lot of pain, have not learned how to heal themselves properly, and they become implementers of policies and programs. And it's not holistic, it's not healthy. And that has been the backdrop to some of our frustration with our formal child and youth care systems, our correctional systems, actually, frankly, how some of our governments function. And so the healing is needed at multiple levels. And so, yeah, we're wanting to see the voice released and, yeah, taking its place, just as Donald Marshall Jr. fought over 30 years that I've known him to find his voice, and now that he's dead and gone, his voice is getting heard. So the thread, but hopefully we'll have more of the dance on the beach kind of kids finding their voice, because that's, as you point out, where the new vibe is, and that's where we want to be, because I've already done my time. I don't want to be dragged down in that world anymore. Another time we'll of course look to have a conversation about your special spiritual heritage and elders' teachings, because that is exactly how I first met Andy with his work in with Prophecy Keepers, and he really provoked me to remember what I knew about Grandfather Commander. So it was really pretty neat. And then I met him again, and I want to just say this right now, in Minneapolis by chance. He came when I was totally exhausted, late in the night, and he brought an exhausted elder to meet me. But what an amazing woman, Gina Miranda, and her amazing book about the indigenous peoples, the knowledge of the Mayan calendar and stuff like that. So, in addition to your work with the youth, may I congratulate you on these initiatives with Andy as well, to bring back the voice of the indigenous folk and make them relevant to us. Do you want to say anything else in passing, and then I'll move on to your music?
Well, I just want to say I honor you and your work and all of your colleagues and the work that everyone is doing. I can't. I don't think I can say it any better than you did, to sum up the importance of putting our youth in a position to succeed. So, on that note, I'm just honored to contribute and look forward to the future and working side by side in the future moving forward.
Okay. Yes, amazing. I mean, we could have a whole separate conversation about Serpent Mound and Cahokia and all of that. We've got other colleagues who would be very much interested in that kind of discussion. Maybe we will do another live stream about that some stage. But Miigwech, thank you very much. A real honor to finally meet you, and all the best with the next few weeks of work. Take care.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, sister.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Now I am hoping I shall be able to play the music of Big Bai and his youth as we shift the energy to the next stage in our presentation.
May I have your attention? There's some things I like to mention to all my people on the planet who's in a weak position. It's only temporary. I know it can be scary, but the sun didn't go away. It's just preparing for a new day.
Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day.
What is it that we're doing? Who is it that we're fooling? Think of the life that you're choosing. Now let go of your illusions. Be honest with yourself. This will enhance your mental health. Now let's all take a breath and use the wisdom we have left. Do we really have to kill? Do we really have to steal? Do we really have to lie? Do mothers us really have to cry? Or can we make a better choice? Do you hear that inner voice? If you can, it just might say, prepare yourself for a new day.
Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day.
If you want to move higher, you must control your desires and strive for what you need, 'cause your wants can breed greed. This is for the youth. They deserve to know the truth, not the lies we were taught, not the stories that we bought. The future's in their hands. We must make them understand. They must share the same plate. They must learn from our mistakes. No one survives alone, although they say to each his own. Then what direction do we take? This is why we need a new day.
Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day.
Just know that we are one. Let's stop pretending that we're dumb. Have the guts to do what's right. Have the guts to change your life. Although the road will be rough, you can't afford to just give up. Make time to focus on your spirit. If you feel me, let me hear it.
Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day. Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day. Everything will be alright. It's a new day. Don't you give up the fight, 'cause it's a new day. All you have to do is try. It's a new day. Keep your head to the sky, 'cause it's a new day.
Well, thank you very much for that special moment. Okay, let me do that. Let me get this up. Let me reduce the size. And yeah, let me at this moment say in transition a big thank you to my new young colleague April, who's helped me figure out so many details with this live streaming process. As you will note, I have a very untidy desktop. Many people have criticized my desktop over the years, and that's why I've posted this little photo graphic that screens off one bottom portion while we're talking today. But I just like to take a minute to say, hey, meet Yoshi. This is our Circle of All Nations 2020 turtle that is moving into the future. And this collage was put together by my niece, Talisa Liliana, who's actually in Australia right now, though she belongs in South Africa. And Talisa, Max, and Byron and I visited the aquarium in Cape Town many years ago, and I think it was 2012, and met this turtle. The turtle had been brought there because it was injured, and the new aquarium were figuring out how to take care of it. Well, the turtle taught them how to do their job very, very well, and they did, in fact, take great care of Yoshi. And what I discovered quite by chance on February 22nd, Uncle Cyril's birthday, my physics and chemistry uncle, teacher and gardener, um, was that Yoshi had been released into the ocean to head back home to breed. She actually made a wrong turn, went up the cold Benguela Current, west coast of Africa, before after 6 months later, before after 6 months, she made a turn back and headed to Australia. And in March was headed to the west coast, the Pilbara coast, to her nesting grounds. And so, though thwarted by things that impact the migrational, intuitive migrational travel circuit, energy circuit, magnetic guidance that turtles lead as they traverse the oceans, traverse the earth, things that are impacted by the moon, things that we humans impact without thought, devastating the patterns, the movements of these creatures. Well, Yoshi managed to find her way back, and so she's our kind of model for the ongoing journey of life, and she's serving to hide my untidy screen here. Okay, so now I'm going to take a few minutes to race through our presentation on child and youth care. And it's a Circle of All Nations Can Teach presentation, where our focus again is training, education, advocacy, communications, and healing. And with respect to this particular thing, child and youth care, it's a Circle of All Nations social justice passion. In this particular instance, we're acknowledging Donald Marshall's stolen youth, imprisoned at age 16 for a murder he had not committed, and his work to develop an indigenous cultural camp for youth at risk. But we're beginning with a overview of historical European patterns of child raising, child rearing. I did this research when we were putting together our book on learning from a kindergarten dropout, our book on Grandfather William Commanda. And in part, it was also through researching some of the materials of the National Association of Child and Youth Care Worker in South Africa, work that my sister Zeni Thumbadoo does, work that Grandfather Commanda blessed in its early moments in 2000, and so we consider it under the broad Circle of Under All Nations umbrella, and we wish Zeni and her colleagues all the best in this supremely challenging time as COVID impacts both child and youth care workers. They've lost youth care workers over the last few months, but children in impoverished conditions, living in isolated areas, having access to the support of workers who keep checking on them and keep them motivated. So yeah, amazing new hard work that they're doing over there, and our hearts go out and our prayers go out for them. But anyway, to go back to this, prior to 400 AD, children were deemed inherently wicked and without souls, and therefore they had to be controlled. They were small adults. Initially, adults were not punished for child murder or abuse. Illegitimate children were killed off routinely, girls frequently, and abnormal children always. Between 400 and 1300 AD, the view of children as evil persisted. Parents maintained a physical distance. There were wet nurses. Children were sold into slavery. They were put into monasteries, convents, foster homes, workhouses. And then between 1300s and 1700s, views began to change. There, it began to feel that the dangerous forces in children could be molded by adults. Use of restraints was viewed as a kindness. With the advent of the printing press and increased literacy, distinctions were beginning to be made between children and youth, children and adults, pardon me. Between the 1700s and 1800s, more supportive attitudes developed. Now they began to see children as a clean slate, the tabula rasa, and it was the responsibility of the adults to influence the children. Between 1800s and 1900s, there was gradually a reduction in child labor. Of course, I'm picking up some of these stories from various chunks of history, various philosophers, various articles, but also literature. And you'll all remember Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist and David Copperfield and child labor and kids in coal mines and things like that. But by the 1800s and 1900s, we had the Industrial Revolution, which required now a new type of workforce. And together with that came the reduction in use of child labor and education for children. So, with the 1900s, with the new attitude, came also thoughts about child welfare, philosophies of caring. In the 2000s, we began to see preschool, universal daycare, nannies. Now, you'll note that this is all still along the line of institutional care, and of course, for a deeper analysis, of course, you have to look at this in the context of the labor market, the need for women to be working, the need for two-family households, and also the whole movement, the women's movement, the feminist agenda, the women in the workplace agenda. So all of these things impacted the development of some of these philosophies. And as social welfare became part of the mentality of thinkers, the 20th century was envisioned as the century of the child by Swedish sociologist Karen Key. And there was faith in the progress of science and a rebirth of human values to ensure that the education of children would become the highest function. But unfortunately, the labeling, isolating, marginalizing, and criminalization of youth appears to actually be the growing trend. Today, bullying, violence, at-risk notations, attention deficit disorder, autism, mentally disturbed, fetal alcohol syndrome, youth crime, delinquency, deviance are more often the notions that come to mind when we think about children and youth. The ones who don't come to the direct attention of justice or correctional forces are alienated, angry, depressed, suicidal, or on prescribed or unprescribed drugs. Others are deemed indolent. If children are the future, then this is indeed a century of tremendous vulnerability. Further, youth of today are the post 9/11 generation, and across the globe, they have internalized a deep level of psychic fear that makes them extremely vulnerable to physical and mental health challenges. Reclaiming youth at risk presents ideas to counterbalance the alienation of youth, drawing to a large extent on ideas of indigenous roots. Here I reference the book with Martin Brokenleg and colleagues. Education and empowerment of children used to be the central purpose and the highest function of traditional North American societies. Indigenous were critical to the family's purpose and survival. Indigenous child-raising practices were a powerful challenge to Western education and youth development and were suppressed and eradicated by the presumed superiority of Western approaches. The enforced and abusive colonial and religious practices In particular, the residential school experience and legacy struck a near genocidal death blow in the social structure of families and communities. And we are still dealing with the ramifications. Yet, in this decomposition lie also the seeds for eco-revival. But given the vastly transformed and speedily changing spiritual, social, economic, and political fields, the vitality of the seeds is dependent on the nurturing. In our view, regrouping in the indigenous playing field is of critical importance to enhance the potential for resurgence. So let me repeat that. In our view, regrounding in the indigenous playing field is critical to enhance the potential for resurgence. So in indigenous thinking, the child's life purpose within the indigenous community is what I want to focus on here. Indigenous and pagan people believe that each child is born with a purpose. It is a unique purpose that is at the same time profoundly connected with community. Some communities are so interested in the purpose of the child that they consult with the stars, the Mother Earth, the plant and animal worlds regarding its future. Names are chosen consistent with this mission. And here I reference West African writer Malidoma Somé, who writes about the healing wisdom of Africa and has been actually very influential in North America, bringing ideas about indigenous African approaches not only to child and youth care but to healing. So, the developed child contributes to the strengths of the community. Indigenous values underline the connectedness with all creation. For many, rituals provides a sense of connection with the community and with a greater dimension. It also gives place for rites of passage to mark the thresholds of growth and maturation, something that has been lost in our society. Initiation rites are a series of planned challenges presented to individuals so that they may grow into their potential. Tribal life is full of public ritual initiations marking the various stages in a person's life. Successful completion of the rites increases the individual's responsibilities within the community. The fundamental focus on community responsibility as compared to individual rights melds everything together. It is ironic that children of indigenous peoples, who historically were so especially welcomed into the world and whose upbringing was so carefully nurtured, now suffer the worst abuse, neglect, and pain. Well, now we come to our medicine wheel. We take the cyclical and spiraling medicine wheel approach in organizing all our Circle of Nation activities and see this emergent model as relevant to animation of the Circle of Courage approach. Some concepts in brain-friendly learning are consistent with our efforts. With brain-friendly learning, I've learned that in a world of confusion, the brain is the processing organ to make patterns out of elements and to identify objectives, develop programs of action, to energize and respond. In a sense, this is the right brain engaging with the information. The cognitive brain is stimulated by motion. This is consistent with the webbed map thinking of indigenous peoples, where the map is the guide, the blueprint. The map structures and inputs values, but it is a law of nature structure. As per a river with banks, and flow and emergence, responsive to multiple stimulants, wind, sand, rock, sun, cold, cosmic movement, etc., yet also bounded by its banks. So there's a structure to how the river moves, and there's a lot to be learned in that motif. But this approach to learning is grounded in experiential learning, nature based learning, social settings, in cooperative and collaborative learning, in narrative and storytelling, and in verbal learning, oral learning, and via autonomy. But it is not about autonomy without structure, without relationship to the whole. It incorporates discipline and responsibility, i.e., an inner discipline, a self discipline linked to a sense of values, informed by reflexivity, that is, creative reflection on one's own behavior and thinking. It develops personal power versus position, social, economic, political, or external power. It develops reflective personal power versus obedience to an outer discipline. The personal power is linked with autonomy, and it incorporates equality, inclusive of respect, justice, and dignity. Children model behavior of adults, the animal world, nature teaches, and they make choices without coercion. This requires observation, listening, apprehension, attention, consideration, analysis, comprehension, reflexivity, and choosing. It is organic, this process. It is creative, it is flexible, it is eminent, responsive, versus teaching by rule, by rote, by obedience, by chastisement, by punishment. It is not without structure, organization, and coherence, but it is consistent with the intelligence of nature, the laws of nature. Dominant culture approaches to learning are left logic brain oriented, didactic, rule oriented, institutionalized. It is increasingly a part of our post industrial global reality and dominant ways of learning and thinking. It is reinforced by capitalism, globalization, religious, and political control regimes. It reflects the patterns of the old evolutionary brain with the fight or fight rules, hence a growing crisis with youth at risk, with reduced capacity for resilience. The circle of courage motif described by Professor Brokenleg talks about the notion of belonging. It takes a village to raise a child. I wrote actually Hillary Clinton, but it comes really from the Zulu people in my homeland, South Africa. The interconnection, the interrelationship, the interdependence is critically important, not just the inclusion. And this is a key element of our Jinawe Daganuk Circle of All Nations, William Commander belief. It's in the interrelationship that co-creation and creativity emerges. Together with that comes the notion of mastery. Kids need to feel competent. So competence, responsibility, work as a way of life versus an economic pursuit, work as contributing cornerstone of the community. These are the kind of concepts where we want to see youth develop mastery, feel competent at what they are committed to accomplishing with the gifts that they have. And that, of course, takes me back then to Adrian Esposito, our friend who I mentioned earlier, who used his gifts to create documentaries, teaching documentaries, that have shown how when youth learn to blossom with their own strengths, they contribute then to the strengthening of the community. And so we have to find ways to encourage that. Youth also need then this notion of independence, of autonomy. And the blending of autonomy and belonging in an interdependence is critical for survival, harmonizing apparently conflicting needs. We suggest that this type of independence comes from a lot of the personal reflection, the personal time that outdoor education programs allow for a child to determine how to 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 come to terms with uh, energies of conflict, energies of struggle, or with new ideas. And finally, there's then the concept of generosity and altruism and communicating and serving a community, a social consciousness. These then become the emblems in the medicine wheel badge for an warrior, a resilient warrior. I go back to them again because I see that I don't actually have my circle image to show you how it all intersects here. But I basically see our medicine wheel intersecting like this across a central diagonal. And in the east, I would put in the place of vision. Of course, you'll have to come to some of our other circle workshops to understand this better. But in the east, a place of vision, a place of planning, a place of belonging. Kids need very much a sense of belonging to community and interrelationship. In the south, at the bottom of my upside down V, is our zone of action, of animation, of moving into the world and engaging with people. And here, kids need a sense of mastery. They need to feel capable. They need to feel confident. They need to have those kinds of values guiding their relationships with others. When we go to the west, for us, it's the zone of reflection. And this then is where youth need to think about things, to think about whether they're doing well, whether they're doing things right, whether they're doing things wrong, whether they need to strengthen their understanding of things. And so it's an important zone in where they forge their own individual voices and identities and choices and strengths. And finally, at the north becomes the zone of generosity, where then they're able to share their gifts with strength and ease and enjoyment and enjoy and create then this new cycle of energy, of youth energy, such that we saw really actually in the music video of um, a few minutes ago. There you see the courage of the resilient warrior. And knowing that we have many struggles to help youth move forward, I also like to end then with this note about the Jina Wedagano Ubuntu. We're all connected, we're all interrelated message. This actually comes from a t-shirt of a child and youth care worker involved with the disability program with the National Association of Child and Youth Care Work. Nothing about us without us, and that then is ultimately the vision for integration, such that all enter the door that is round and open, and move into new hopes for life. I've started to create a list of movies and documentaries that Grandfather Commander and I thought could help folk shift forward with some of their thinking and integration of these ideas. And as Big Bai and I talked about earlier, we want to have these ideas accessible to people so that they can integrate them and take on the energy and move with it, because we don't always need training programs to help us. We need to do the reflection and incorporate some of the practices in our styles. So we thought really movies like Smoke Signals, Rabbit Chain Fence, Once Were Warriors, Whale Rider, Lion, were tough movies, tough stories. But as you reflect on those stories, sort of sometimes at a little distance from our own personal articulation of our own personal life stories, enables us to look for strategies. And so anybody can do this. Children can do this, childcare workers can do this, others can do this, and incorporate those ideas as part of lifestyle. Um, we have a few documents and reports, and I'm just barely building this list. So we have a circle report on child and youth care work. As a part of this video, you will of course have access to this PowerPoint presentation, and we'll be adding other materials. I've actually written a long a long narrative on Donald Marshall Jr., and I've included also the remarks of some of his friends. Some of this was created at the time of his um, Circle of All Nations Memorial, and I shall post it on Facebook. It's a work in progress because there are many more things that I want to write about in terms of my relationship with Donald Marshall, but it will give you a thread into his thinking with respect to justice, rights, but especially child and youth care work, such as I learned to understand. Okay, so now at 3:44, I am going to see if we can take you to the Donald Marshall Senior Youth Cultural Camp video, and thereafter I shall see who's there up on Facebook who might want to share, chat, and join us in this conversation. I'm sorry I've ignored all our Facebook friends who might be commenting right now or may have been on. But really, as I told you, my graphics chip or whatever it is on my Mac was acting a bit strange this morning, or this when we started this workshop. But actually, I think my prayers, or maybe yours, have worked, and it's been pretty good and stable. So now let me see if I can bring this forward and find out documentary. Okay, I guess I have to find Finder. Give me a moment, folk. There we go. There we go. Oh, by the way, that's another t-shirt designed by me and colleagues.
In the very heart of Cape Breton Island is a place which can take your breath away. It's called Malagawatch, and for generations it was a meeting place for the Micmac people of Nova Scotia, until they were driven out in the mid-1700s, driven from their homes and their traditions. In recent years, however, the Micmac people have been trickling back to Malagawatch to reclaim their history. It's also a place where a select group of youths will meet head-on with that past.
Matthew Lewis and John Paul Bernard. This is Seymour Doucette, he's one of our counselors. This is Greg Francis, he's one of the counselors in training. Mike Doucette, he's one of the head counselors, and Steve Christmas, he's the fishing expert. And over here is Incan Young, he's also a counselor. Okay? And we'll send George to Mr. Downey, he's one of the campers. Okay? George isn't going to pick on you, and don't you guys pick on George.
So you guys ready to work?
Yeah, get to work.
Come on.
Get these guys a job.
You guys will have one. You guys are tough enough. From where the rock? Like other youngsters across the country, these boys are getting their first taste of summer camp. But for this group, images of nature hikes and campfire ghost stories are dismissed when it soon becomes obvious this is no ordinary camp. The boys are here to learn the ways of their ancestors, and on this, the first day, that means making your own house. In this case, a traditional teepee. Something everyone here wants to get in on.
Volunteer. Billy? Yeah, who's volunteer? Hurry. Come on, Dirk. I want you to cut some of those sticks. Yeah? Come on, Dirk. Come on. I want to go. Let me stand it up for... Bring them together. All right, put them down. Ow. Give me a hand. Put it on the bottom, Greg. Put it, stand up. All right, spread them out. Spread them out. Good, good. Okay, okay. Take it over that way. Put them in it up. Two more. Take it right over. I want that fire making the sunset. Yeah. Just making sure. Our Micmac knots ain't as good as those Sioux women that set up those teepees out west, down south.
The women do it?
Yeah, this is your job.
Oh. Oh, my!
Most of these campers, as well as most of the counselors, have never built a Western-style teepee.
We should have tried to throw some of the flats up on top first. Flat soda.
However, the finer points of construction will have to wait, as Mother Nature instills a sense of urgency to this project. The camp is the result of a vision and 20 years of much frustration and pain for Donald Marshall Jr. His goal is to run a camp that will teach traditional skills and values to troubled and delinquent Micmac youths, kids who've been in trouble or who are at most certainly heading that way.
My main concern was trying to help some of these kids out. As I see a lot of them, they're pointing the same road that I went down, and a few of my other friends that went down.
That road led a troubled young Marshall to the streets of Sydney, Cape Breton Island, and it was there where his life would change forever. In 1971, Marshall was wrongly convicted of stabbing a friend to death. He would spend his next 11 years in prison paying for someone else's crime. It was during his imprisonment that his plans for a youth camp began to take shape.
Being in a penitentiary at the age of 17 where not too many kids were in a penitentiary when I went there. These guys are all growing up men, to me I had to grow up fast in there. And thinking same time, I had to grow up fast. I had to learn how to survive, and when I got out, I kept that dream up that I want to do something. But at times it was a nightmare to me. It was really, I tried to get things going, and I kept at it for about 10 years. I did presentations. I wrote out things to try to convince people that we need some kind of environment where we can teach our kids their native ways again and come back to our own native ways. Because a lot of us, we lost it.
The same system which kept Donald Marshall warehoused for 11 years ultimately became one of his strongest allies for the camp.
Penitentiary service, the correctional services, they back us up 100%, Like you mentioned earlier, why do you deal with the prisoner officials and all that? Because, they offered to help us up. Because the youth centers around here, they deal with kids and young kids, and nobody ever involved in stuff until I started it. And a lot of them know that's it and believe that it's a good project that we're doing. Instead of getting some kid, especially a native kid, go into a reform school or something and let him loose, let him loose on a reserve or in the city of Halifax, they're not going to last in the town of Halifax. A lot of these kids won't last.
Now in its third year, the camp is seen by many as a final chance to steer borderline youth away from a future of skirmishes with the law, if not serious crimes.
The most stressful thing is, I guess, is when you start dealing with the kids, we know there's going to be a major crisis here at one point or the other. We had them before. And the biggest stressful thing we ever had was when we have to deal with individuals that they don't want to participate in it. They don't want nothing to do with it because they don't really know what's going on. Because they're caught up in this circle that we're in, that's all they know, that they come off the reserve is, violence and alcohol, drugs. That's how they grew up.
But for the most part, the kids can't wait to try out new skills, which are sometimes a lot harder than they look, as this would-be lobster fisherman quickly found out.
Terry, you grab him.
Bring him over this way,
Grab from behind him. Hold him up. Hold it. Let him go. Where is he? Go on.
Get me out of here, man!
You're all right. You're all right.
No, come here.
Throw him down. It's okay, bud. It's all right.
What's going on here?
Whoa, shit! What was that?
Yeah, look at that. Ta-da. Look at that.
Gotta take off this, man.
Too comfortable. But you scared him.
Scared me!
On the second day of the camp, Marshall's prediction of trouble materializes. A crisis strikes. Two of the campers are ignoring rules and creating trouble among the younger ones. Counselors move in to defuse the situation. Both sides dig in their heels, and it quickly goes from bad to worse.
That's the kind of friends you want to have? Huh?
No, I just thought we all came up here to meet more people to participate in many more things.
Carrying on and fucking around with George.
One boy decides to pack up and leave.
You told me you wanted to come here and you want to be a counselor. Are you a good example? Well, when are you going to start?
Then another one goes.
I'm not checking, I'll fucking do it.
Precautions are taken in the event that arguing turns to violence.
Split this, Mike.
John,
Let's
is
split
that
it.
a knife?
Yeah?
One.
It's not mine.
I'll give it back to you.
The counselors didn't want either boy to leave and were finally able to convince one to stay. But they know it's unrealistic to expect all the kids to accept what the camp is trying to teach them.
We anticipate it every time we do camp. We know we're going to have individuals because we ask for give us the problem kids, give us the worst ones you have, and we'll work with them. We'll try to show them the way. Unfortunately, they're not ready yet.
It's pretty stressful trying to convince a kid you can't go home because you're going to end up in trouble because you're on probation. I fought to keep him here, and I couldn't do it, so he left. So to me it's a disappointment. Even losing one guy, it's a disappointment that we lost one kid. Because I found out that he was getting withdrawals from drugs, smoking dope. And that's what he wanted to go home for.
Regular activities are immediately put on hold to allow the group to form a talking circle, a sort of group discussion about what's happened.
But I told him, if you're going to stay in our camp, this Marshall camp, and this is not a summer camp. We're here to work on your healing. And they are very angry little guys, all of them. They don't know how to they don't know how to take direction or when somebody asks them to do something. They don't want to do it. They don't like being told what to do.
In the talking circle, the day's conflict becomes a lesson.
But we want you to participate in these things. This camp is about healing. And the only way for you to really get a grasp of what's wrong with you, or for us to know what's wrong with you, is for you to tell us. And when we go into those sweat lodges, or into the talking circles in the evenings, that's where we expect to hear these things that are bothering you.
Well, I'm proud to be Mi'kmaq. Eh? By living that way, earn your respect with the community, with the people. That's what it works.
Once the situation is resolved, it's back to the daily program. And despite teenage appetites, there's no rush to dig into the traditional Micmac delicacy of freshly caught eel.
And in order to get all that slime off, that's scamoan. Take a handful of this stuff.
Try to dry him up. His nerves is gone. Because he put dirt all over it.
I'll wash that off.
Still do. That looks like ice.
Yeah, it is. His stomach.
Yeah, junk.
This is old guys back home. They love this stuff, man. They love it. My father was here. He named them all. Take them home. Look at that.
This part of Cape Breton Island is rich in natural herbs and medicines, if you know what to look for. A local elder is brought to the camp to teach the boys medicine gathering.
All right. Sweet grass, now eat it. If you make a lemon, I got this lemon. Just take one at a time.
That's the way I
And
learned
if it's easy to pull, see? That's sweet grass.
Did you see this year?
This was easy.
Hey man, I found a couple. No, that's not sweet grass. No. How about this?
Yeah.
That's the only
What
one.
about this?
If the field is full of
That's one.
sweet grass, then you want it.
This is punch berries. Cool. And it's good for high blood pressure. If somebody have a heart trouble. And they boil these. Yeah?
Is this okay?
Yes. You clean them and wash them after you pick them, huh? Then you boil them and you drink juice.
But the most sacred of all the teachings occurs at least once each day, and it takes place in the camp sweat lodge. For most of the campers, this will be their first traditional sweat, a ceremony of healing, cleansing, and renewal for the mind, body, and spirit.
There you go, Matt. As we go through the circle, and they listen to the prayer, they finally learn how to talk, how to open up to us.
we have counselors in here with us from the treatment centers, and from other agencies that work with children. And sometimes, for them to understand, they have to sit in the circle with us too, and they have to go through what we go through. But when they're in there, it's a totally different atmosphere than what it is in a treatment center or a facility that deals with abused children or anything. It's totally different. To them, for them, it's spiritual, it's cultural, and it's teaching them about respect too. Everything here, what we did here today, these guys are really hyper. Most of these children that we're working with are really problem children at home.
Doucette says his primary focus for the beginners is to make sure no one gets uncomfortable or too frightened.
When you get in there, it's dark and it's really warm, it's hot. When I first came in, I was scared. I felt I was getting burned intentionally, but I really thought they were trying to cook me. That's how unbearable it is. If you go in there blind and you don't, and the doctor didn't tell me nothing. Like what I do with the children here, I tell them what to expect, how it's going to be, and I work them through it.
It's this combination of spiritual and skill development that Marshall hopes will keep some of these kids out of trouble. But he says he's careful not to set his goals too high.
Nobody ever taught these kids how to make drums, how to sweat, how to put teepees up, how to clean fish, And that's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach these kids the way our ancestors lived, and to me, it's important for me to do that because, maybe half of the kids that are here, they'll keep up with what they learned here, medicine-wise, hunting-wise, fishing-wise, respect-wise, and, I know a lot of them, some of them won't make it.
This year, for the first time, a judge in another province, New Brunswick, sentenced 2 young offenders to attend this camp as part of their probation. Unfortunately, they never made it, choosing instead to go to hockey school. However, it's this type of diversion process which Donald Marshall hopes to see a lot more of.
I didn't expect the judge to sentence 2 kids to my camp at all. But when I did, I was really, I was excited about it. And I really felt that we're doing something right. I felt that at least somebody thinks we're doing positive things. And to me, we're probably going to help these 2 young kids that were supposed to come.
Nothing changes but the sea. Everything stays the same. I've 100 different reasons to never leave again, to never leave again.
By sheer coincidence, Canadian performer Tom Jackson wraps up a cross-country tour at the nearby Eskasoni Reserve on Cape Breton Island during the time of the camp. Jackson's Dreamcatcher Tour has been traveling the country, promoting suicide prevention on Native communities. It's a message camp organizers wanted their group to also hear. As the week progresses, the boys find it easier to discuss personal issues. In one of the final talking circles with a local tribal police officer, many of the kids talk about the frustration of living on reserves with nothing to do, often the first step to delinquent behavior.
I like a wide range of sports, soccer, volleyball. I think that'd be a little bit more comfortable, having the knowledge to do other things. Like, he's a hockey player. I like basketball. Some other people don't like either sports. They don't have anything to turn to?
There's places that youths want to hang out, and then the police come and they say, well, you guys got to keep going. And then they move into another area, and then they're told again, well, you guys got to keep going because people are complaining. There's no place, and it's just like a game.
That's the reason why I didn't do my PME, because I was in the center too much. Oh, okay. And when it closed down, I had nothing to do.
I want to go where I want to, huh? I was like that for a long time. I got friends too. I don't think I have to stay home and read a fucking book all day. I want to do what I want to. And I don't want no one to stop me and do that. I can handle myself.
That defiant message comes from a 17-year-old who's serving more than a year for 18 break-and-enters he's committed since turning 17. He's been allowed to leave youth custody for the duration of the camp as long as he stays here.
I was getting high, and I owed a pusher here, I owed a pusher there, and money was getting short, right? I was wanting a toke, and when I couldn't get a toke, I made sure I got it, right?
He says this camp is the only environment where he's felt okay to open up about himself.
I don't like the strings getting paid. That's their profession, talking to people. They have to do it to feed their family. These guys don't. They're here on their own time. There's a big difference there. I don't trust this anybody, no? But a camp like this will help me because I trust these guys and I know them, no?
Everyone here has been affected by the camp's focus on traditional teachings. However, it doesn't touch everyone in quite the same way.
Takes me back from when my father used to tell stories, huh? How he was growing up. We sort of lost it for a while. Stuff like this really influences my mind. I need to get back to it, huh? I don't even know my own language. I only know a few words. That's it. That's why I want to go back.
You get to know new people, know what's their life about. You can do a sweat, you can pray, and you can help other people. Ask the grandfathers to pray for if we can help them in our way.
If I do keep up with what I'm learning and what I'm doing here, chances are that maybe I won't go back to that stuff, huh? But I can't predict the future, huh? I don't know what's going to happen, to tell you the truth.
It's pretty rocky to start, no matter what you're doing, we have to deal with what we were dealing with. And we knew what we were dealing with, and I'm really pleased about what happened through the week.
Okay. Well, let me just say then a little bit about that. That documentary was produced by Rod Carlton. When I was working with the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network within the Department of Justice. Um, okay, just give me 1 sec to make the screen look a little better. And it shouldn't be that way. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so in the 90s, well, during the 80s, there were justice inquiries in every province and territory across the country that pointed to how ill-served Indigenous peoples were at every level of the system: policing, justice, corrections, court system, etc., etc. And there were a range of initiatives that emanated from those as well as from the Wake Up Oka crisis. And one of those was the Aboriginal Justice Strategy. It was a legislated initiative, and then by law, a government was obliged to develop the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network. And this was work that I was on assignment to undertake. I had been myself working with the Minister of the Solicitor General at that time. And we developed the Aboriginal Justice Learning Network. During one of my meetings out in the West, Winnipeg actually, I met this young man, Rod Carlton, and he wanted very much to join with what he considered was the exciting work of the Learning Network. And he ended up coming and being our video maker. And so he worked with Donald Marshall, with Jane McMillan, and with the community over there to create this video. This is one of our documentaries. We also did another one on the east side of Vancouver, and this with our friend Frida Enns, who is also part of the Learning Network and part of our circle work with William Commander as well. And those documentaries really, I mean, I don't know, I think this one is as relevant for today as it was, shameful to say, 25 years ago. And unfortunately, the Department of Justice was not able to manage and maintain that program, so it got sidelined. And unfortunately, also the passion and the commitment and the hopes that were ignited by such videos got lost along the way. But now, 25 years later, you know, perhaps there's going to be a new energy to enable us to go back and dig at the roots, dig at the seeds, and regenerate a new dimension of hope for young people. So this then has really been, in part, what I've wanted to share with respect to my own personal engagement with the Donald Marshall work and story. And as I said, I shall be posting um, an article on him in our Facebook Circle of All Nations notes page. I think you have to go to the More button in order to find the notes, and you'll find from time to time we post notes for people who are interested in digging into some of the stories more deeply. Um, Eventually, this video will be part of our new Circle of All Nations live videos uh, that you can access whenever suits you. I had intended to create two videos out of this because I know 4 or 5 hours is a long stretch for a video, but I'm sure you can break up your moments of study or whatever. It was just simpler to go with the technology as it worked today. Now, so while I'm mentioning the technology, then maybe I just say a huge word of thank you to Facebook for making such technology and communications opportunities available to us. Really, what we've been doing since the inception of our live videos is host uh, global conferences on topics that are important to us, and we've been able to share with people across the world. We've been able to be totally inclusive. And we've also been able to include the voice of people from all over the world so far in some of our discussions. Today, I think we've managed most effectively to use all sorts of technology, and so yes, thank you for that. Um, with the notion of water and journey, I'd like to just share another little Donald Marshall William Commander story. And I should have actually posted a photograph of Junior, but you'll find it on Facebook. Junior and Todd Labrador, Mi'kmaq from Nova Scotia as well, who created with grandfather, who learned from grandfather commander's canoe making techniques. And of course, our good friend Valerie pro bono created a canoe documentary, Good Enough for Two, where grandfather teaches his canoe making skills. But anyway, that very canoe, both Junior and Todd Labrador carried on to uh, Victoria Island during one of our solstice Circle of All Nations, or maybe it was our Paddle for Peace events. And it reminds me of another canoe story. Uh, One day, Donald Marshall was out on Glace Bay, I believe, with another kid, a biggish kid, and then all of a sudden a storm whipped up, and it was apparently quite frightening. So in the end, he had to get the kid to lie down and wait the canoe as he paddled it back to shore. And what we discovered was what he was actually paddling was a William Commander canoe. So even in those days, grandfather Commander kept his eye open for this very special person. And I think that canoe is held at the Halifax Friendship Center. Okay, so now I am going to really go to um, Facebook, and I am hoping I'm going to see where there are people. Oh, yeah, people have joined the show, so this is really good. And now, could I ask if anybody is interested in chatting? And I'm so sorry I ignored you earlier. If anybody is there and would like to wave at me, maybe I don't think I have you on. If I could just find you. No, I can't. Sorry. Um, this person who I'm noticing here, Sarah Lucero, actually came to visit Grandfather Commander many years ago, and she's part of uh, another part of the work that we're most fascinated by, and this is the Chaco Canyon and the ancient Misa that documents really the great knowledge of the indigenous peoples, the cosmic knowledge and the scientific earth knowledge. But in the orientation of the buildings, you can see that the ancient people tracked the solstices and the equinox. Um, they marked the timing of eclipses in their stone markings. But not only that, uh, this culture, the Shako culture, were the only people in the world who were also able to map the movement of the moon in her own somewhat fickle circuit. That's what we call the moon circuit, because she seems to be moving all over the show. But in fact, really, she moves in a circuit that is closer to the Earth um, at one point, and then over another 9.5 years moves further away while she's still moving around her orbit. but the people at Shako were able to track her 18-year circuit. It's taken modern science a long time to begin to catch up with some of these things that not only did the indigenous peoples know, but that they also marked on the land. And so it's really devastating to us that that the newcomers to this day think nothing of destroying ancient laboratories and observatories like that, and sacred places, sacred vortexes. The word Begbai used yesterday to describe some of the places that are so important across North America. And we're hoping then that this new voice and these new times will encourage people to come forward and understand better indigenous thinking. Okay, so anyway, that was Sarah. I don't see that I can go and find her, unfortunately, and since I'm not really wanting to venture further here, I see people have been watching, but I don't know whether anybody would like to chat. Is there anybody who would like to chat? Great to see you there. Delphina, thank you. I'm going to say then, thank you very much for being with us. And I should say, next week is, of course, the equinox. September 20th, the equinox. So we'll be hosting a Circle of All Nations annual equinox event at the same place. And also, we acknowledge always the United Nations International Day for Peace, and that's, of course, September 21st. We acknowledge the efforts of the Ottawa Peace Council the Ottawa City of Peace Group, who've initiated many activities over the last dozen or so years to advance a culture of peace in the city of Ottawa. And some of these activities will be happening online this year, but of course COVID has curtailed the limits to which people can go. It is quite possible that I shall have one of our colleagues from Argentina with us. She's a member of the UN ECOSOC group and has been a friend of Circle of All Nations for multiple years. In fact, we represented her organization when we went to one of the conference on climate of the United Nations, one of the COP series, COP 17, I do believe. So yeah, with any luck, we'll be able to have her come and share. And finally, let me finish on a really good academic note, as we're trying to blend multiple ways of teaching. I, together with my supervisor, Fraser Taylor, was able to publish a second article in the International Journal of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. I'm not saying it in the right order now. The International Journal of Arts, Humanities and Social Science. And our latest article, which arrived to me on 9/11, September 9th, September 11th, is focused on the discourse of William Commander. So academics may be interested in tracking that one. We're very grateful that this international journal, with colleagues from all over the world, has been so interested in the indigenous thinking of such a person as Grandfather William Commander. And we think it's very, very special that that article was published at that particular moment. At that particular moment, Grandfather Commander and I were stranded in South Africa because 9/11 happened. And some of you may recall that I said before we knew anything about 9/11, we were actually at the Santon Center outside Johannesburg, um, with my sister and with Savo. And grandfather was sitting in the outside coffee space, and all of a sudden the leaves on the ground whirled up, whipped around, and blew around strongly. And he said, something bad has happened for the world. And then later, when we went to my sister's home, we found my other sister phoning to tell us that the Twin Towers were down. So we were actually stranded in South Africa at this particular moment, in 2001. But it also gave us a remarkable opportunity to meet the great Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa, Zulu shaman and writer and healer, incredible thinker. We had already read his work and we already knew something about him, but of course it was a profound moment to meet him. And over the years, we maintained a relationship with him. Actually, when he was very sick, he actually called grandfather for healing prayers, sent us an eagle feather. So, yeah, so this is a moment of that kind of memory. But in fact, yes, grandfather anticipated that something uh, bad had happened to this world. And really, on a global scale, uh, since 9/11, all children have grown up now with a new degree of fear. This year, 2020, we now are launched into yet another kind of global crisis with COVID and with the environmental challenges, the extreme weather, the irrevocable climate change, the incredible loss of species that is happening under our way. Uh, Again, life has changed um, um, in a really, really challenging way. We remember the people who are fighting fires, who are dealing with floods, who are dealing with pain, disaster, illness, dealing with the emergencies that they have to find ways to respond to, all those institutional folk, the universities that are trying to keep people educated, and remember them all as we finish our event today. But next week, I shall perhaps share a little bit about Isaias, a very important word, very important name that grandfather uh, and I discussed before he died. Um, so yeah, 1 o'clock next week for the Circle of All Nations Equinox gathering. It won't be quite as long as today's session, but we hope you'll be with us. Take good care. Bye bye.